Good morning, honorable members. This is a great day to be alive. Our God is great and greatly to be praised. For our Moments of Impact devotional segment today, I'll be speaking from the topic, This is Your Day for a Miracle. Today, I want to herald the message that God is in the business of releasing miracles in the earth. A miracle is defined as an extraordinary event manifesting divine intervention in human affairs. A miracle is an extremely outstanding or unusual event, thing, or accomplishment. There are many of you today under the sound of my voice who are in desperate need of a miracle to take place in your life. For some of you, you need a relationship miracle. Others, you need a physical miracle. There's a health challenge in your body. Then there are those who need miracles in their finances. Then there are those who need spiritual miracles. Whatever area of your life you need a miracle in, rest assured that God is willing and able to give you one today. Psalms chapter 77 verse 14 says, "You are the God who perform miracles. You display your power among peoples." There's a brief story I want to read to you today that's recorded in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 5, verses 2 to 9, where Jesus performs a miracle on a lame man. And it reads, "Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. And in these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever first stepped into water would be made whole of the disease he had. And a certain man was there, which was possessed with an infirmity for 38 years. When Jesus saw him there, he knew how long he had been in that case. And he said unto this man, Will thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him and said, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another man steppeth down before me. Jesus said unto him, Rise, take up your bed and walk. And immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath." In this story, the man who was sick for 38 years experienced a miracle the same day he had an encounter with Jesus. The wait was now over. He no longer had to battle with those who entered the pool before him. When Jesus told him to rise, take up your bed and walk, he was telling him, this is your day for a miracle. He wanted this lame man to know that it was now time for him to carry what was carrying him for 38 long years. In conclusion, I ask you the very same question today that Jesus asked this lame man, will thou be made whole? Honorable members and those under the sound of my voice, the word of the Lord to you today is, it's time for you to rise, take up your bed and walk. It's time for you to carry what has been carrying you. This is your day for a miracle. Selah. Think and act on these things. Let us pray. Our gracious and eternal Father, we hallow your sacred name. We acknowledge today that you are God and beside you there is no other. You are the creator of heaven and earth. Your word declares the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. You are sovereign and all powerful. You are great and mighty. No one can compare to you. You are the great I am. I ask you, Lord, today to release miracles upon everyone under the sound of my voice. Release financial miracles. Release relational miracles. Release spiritual miracles. Release healing miracles today. And I thank you in advance for doing it on their behalf. Now, Father, bless the proceedings of this house. May your Holy Spirit lead and guide all of what will transpire today. Grant these honorable members strength, wisdom, and knowledge from on high as they seek to move our country forward. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Let us repeat the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. When the House suspended its business last evening, we were debating two supplementary appropriation bills and the midterm budget report as a compendium. I presume we are ready to continue. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma, Ragged Island.
Mr. Deputy, at the outset, let me send a special shout out to the people of Exuma, the Exuma Keys and Ragged Island, who have sent me here for a second consecutive term to help in our overarching mission to improve life for all Bahamians. And I thank them for doing so. I want to also congratulate Prime Minister Davis for this 2022-2023 mid-year budget. He is doing a good job as Minister of Finance and an even better job as Prime Minister. And I commend him on this communication and budget, mid-year budget. As anyone can plainly see, Mr. Deputy, the numbers speak for themselves. Our policies are working, and we are creating growth. We are generating greater revenues. We are prudently managing our debt, and we are carefully climbing out of the hole that the former F&M administration has left for us. You know, when we rolled out our economic plan around May 2021, and we announced that we would cut the rate of VAT from 12% to 10%, there was a prediction of doom and gloom. We were told by the F&M and other armchair pundits that we were dreaming and we would wreak havoc, catastrophic harm on the budget and the economy. The current member for East Grand Bahama, who was in another place that allowed him to serve as Minister of State for Finance, called the idea a complete irresponsibility. Completely irresponsible, he said. The member for East Grand Bahama said that our proposal would lead to a dramatic fall off in revenue, likely in excess of 100 million. Well, I'm happy to stand here today and to tell him that he was clearly wrong. No, we were not being irresponsible. We were following our research, which was grounded in data and basic principles of economics, as we brought relief to the Bahamian people. He asked if we would cut back on civil servant salaries and benefits when he made that statement, and he was wrong again. No, East Grand Bahama, we increased them whilst more than meeting our obligations. And we also closed outstanding negotiations with the unions, more than 15 agreements. And I hear the leader of the opposition and the member for St. Barnabas talking a lot about union busting. But we have a better relationship with the unions on our worst day than the former administration that they were a part of had on their best day. Labor-friendly government. Despite the forecasts of fiscal implosion, we reduced VAT, and now it is up to over $600 million so far, already an increase of nearly 25 million compared to last year. We engaged the sharpest financial minds in the business to look at our debt profile and inspire confidence in our bonds, which are now performing better than they did during the prior administration. The global rating agencies have taken note and have stopped the downgrades. We've been given a positive economic outlook for the first time in many years. Though there is still much work to be done and still much economic inequality in our country, we are shaping an economy that is robust and ripe with opportunity. There are some islands like Exuma where businesses cannot fill all the positions they have vacancies for. And developers are looking high and low for construction labor. Things are by no means perfect, but they're already getting better. But the overperformance of revenue is indicative of the momentum engendered by our relationship and our relationships and our administration. Mr. Deputy, there are those who say this all had nothing to do with us. But I say nonsense. They're wrong again. As a businessman, I can tell you that confidence in government, prudent policies, ease of doing business, and providing a stable economic environment in which to operate are also critical. But just like they didn't believe the VAT cut could work, they didn't believe that we could govern without emergency powers and without a competent authority. And they were wrong again. Madam Speaker, what the opposition, Mr. Deputy, what the opposition never seemed to understand while in office is what I told them over a 4-year period consistently, many, many times, is to focus on economic growth, because economic growth is the key. I told them, target growth, and not the boogeyman of corruption and other nonsense, and many of these fiscal rough patches would smooth themselves out. Over and over and over again, I told them, focus on economic growth. They refused to listen. They insisted on going through a performative process of passing bill after bill regarding fiscal transparency that were often at odds with each other, or they had no enabling framework to accommodate, or they brought them in force just before elections, knowing full well that they were on their way out. Mr. Deputy, our strategy isn't to try and figure out what to cut, but rather our strategy is to figure out how to grow.
Yes, yes.
And growth is exactly what we are focused on. And we are indeed growing. We see in 2021, 2022, the economy grew 28.9% in current prices over 2021, 2020 to 2021. Whilst in their last fiscal year, the economy shrank by almost 14%. We are growing with more visitor arrivals too. We are growing with new money in the form of over $6 billion in approved foreign direct investment since we came to office. And let me say that again, because I heard a member from East Grand Bahama bragging the other day about how they attracted 800,000. We have approved over $6 billion with a B in investments since coming to office. And these are real projects with real funding, and some of them are shovel-ready. They are with real people too, not the Oban types. That ill-fated, fraudulent foreign direct investment they hoisted on the people of East Grand Bahama. Those were some dark days, Mr. Deputy. And Marco City and East Grand Bahama should remember, and Central, they were right there with Kalani. Mr. Deputy, we are growing in aviation. We have more airlift. We have more airports coming. New developments are happening, and we have a new strategy in place. Growth, Mr. Deputy, is key, and tourism is growing. In terms of arrivals, we see that in 2022, the numbers were up 233% over 2021, and we achieved the 7 million visitor mark, but fell just shy by a smidge when compared to 2019. And to understand the gravity of the 7 million mark, I want to note that has only ever happened once before in the history of the Bahamas. We are targeting 20% growth in tourism for 2023, and we have every reason to believe that we are going to meet and or exceed that target. Mr. Deputy, as you know, 2019 was a banner year for tourism in this country, with over 7.2 million visitors to our shores. And when we look at what is happening in 2023, we are shattering 2022 numbers and 2019 numbers, and that's great news. What is even better news that I am able to reveal is that we saw nearly 1 million visitors come to the Bahamas in the first month, in January, first month of this year alone. And let me repeat that for good measure. In January, we saw nearly 1 million visitors come to the Bahamas. Yes. And for context, January of 2023, we saw it at almost 1 million, but that number was in the region of 300,000 just the year before, in January 2022. That is a 166% increase between 2022 and 2023. And when we look at 2019, remember that was a banner year. We saw 636,000 air and sea arrivals in January. January 2023 is a 33% increase over 2019, and this trend is holding throughout the islands. We are seeing increase in Nassau and Grand Bahama, in Exuma, Abaco, and Andros too. We are seeing increases in Barry Islands, in Bimini and Cat Key. Yes. We are seeing significant increases in Cat Island, Eleuthera, San Salvador, Long Island, and many other islands. And in January, Grand Bahama saw a 400% rise in sea arrivals compared to the year before. And I point that out to say that the potential of Grand Bahama is there and the momentum is growing. We will also see a great deal more traffic when the Carnival Cruise Port is completed in 2024. So, Mr. Deputy, if I had an hour, I would tell you more about Grand Bahama, but I invite the public to tune into the Grand Bahama Business Outlook next week, when we'll talk more about the Grand Bahama International Airport, the Grand Buchanan Resort, and the growth of Grand Bahama tourism. Yes. But I want to make the plea now to those on Grand Bahama, and indeed throughout the Bahamas, that you seize these opportunities to become business owners. As the chaplain said today, take up your bed and walk. You can provide safe, fun events and activities for visitors that help you to build businesses and create wealth. We will utilize the Tourism Development Corporation to incubate your ideas so that you can benefit from the increased traffic, and we'll be talking a lot more about that real soon. Mr. Deputy, this growth is also being displayed in what we are seeing in departure tax collections. For the first 6 months of this fiscal year, departure tax collections totaled $71.5 million, an improvement of $45 million or 85% over the prior year. In the first half of the year, we collected 73.7% of the budget target for departure taxes. And as I told a recent forum, more visitors means more tax income, more economic activity, and more opportunities and jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities for Bahamians. It means keeping on track with our fiscal plans to ultimately end deficit spending. More visitors, I say, mean more jobs that create spending and more business opportunities that create wealth. More jobs and opportunities for straw vendors, taxi drivers, and tour guides.
Yes.
And beyond arrivals in 2022, room revenues, average daily rates, overall occupancies, spending by cruise visitors are all up, Mr. Deputy. Our strategy is to fully utilize tourism as a tool for economic growth. And you know, it's been suggested by some that I should not take credit for our record tourism numbers. And I agree. I alone cannot take credit for the successes in tourism. And with that said, I would like to recognize a tremendously strong team, young and powerful, Mr. Deputy, who are here today. Deputy Director General of Tourism and Director of Aviation, Dr. Kenneth Roma. Our Permanent Secretary, Mr. Reginald Saunders. Director of Investments, the $6 billion woman, Felicia Hanna. And of course, Senator Randy Rohl, who will have a lot more to say on these issues in the Senate. I would also like to thank Parliamentary Secretary, the member for Central and South Abaco, who's doing a great job in representing me and Team Tourism and the people of the Bahamas at home and abroad. The Nassau Guardian said in its editorial, encouraging tourism numbers, they said last month, and I quote, "These numbers are notable in that they indicate several things. One is that demand is stretching beyond the pent-up desire to travel, and there is meaningful reason to believe that brand awareness and increased travel routes instituted under the current Minister of Tourism are reaping dividends. Another is that the increase in first-time arrivals from the US, Canada, Europe, Africa, Asia, Middle East has possibly been as a result of increased missions. Another inescapable truth is that the expansion of berths at Nassau Cruise Port and the redevelopment of the facilities along with the deft handling of bookings by port management have contributed to the increase. The port has had record days in the last quarter and looks to break even more. I agree with them. So whilst I do not take sole credit for what is happening, there can be no doubt that the team we have at the Ministry of Tourism, Investments and Aviation and our various partners have a great deal to take credit for and to celebrate. What is happening is no accident. We have a strategy for tourism and we're executing it. We have a strategy for investments and we are executing it. We have a strategy for aviation and we are executing it too. And as I said earlier, what we're seeing is no coincidence. And last year, we've established many new air routes. Bahamas Air, Orlando to Freeport, Raleigh to Freeport, Western Air, Fort Lauderdale to Nassau, American Airlines, Charlotte to Freeport, Frontier from Atlanta to Nassau, Sunwing through Hamilton to Nassau, Bahamas Air, Miami, San Salvador, Silver Airways, Florida to Governor's Harbor, Toronto to San Salvador, Air Canada, Air Caribe to San Salvador, Sunwing from Montreal to Freeport. The list goes on and on and on. And we're not going to stop. There's a lot more work to do. In 2023, this month, we are seeing JetBlue begin LaGuardia, Nassau. That's going to be exciting, and we're seeing Western Air, Fort Lauderdale to Freeport. We're seeing Neo Airlines from Milan, Italy to Freeport. And we're seeing JSX Airlines from Dallas to Marsh Harbor coming soon. We've been working, Mr. Deputy.
Yes.
We're strategizing and we're executing the strategy. We're using tourism as well as a tool for innovation. We recently launched in Miami an ocean conservation immersive experience with Beneath the Waves called Our Ocean, Our Future. It was hugely successful. Students between the ages of 13 to 18 participated. There was a panel, allowed them to become involved in the process. The experience promotes ocean health and using science and technology to catalyze ocean policy, protecting threatened species. We are going to bring this experience to Bay Street because we believe it complements the great work already being done by Prime Minister Davis in this space. We envisage using this concept in digital marketing pop-ups in major cities around the world. We're exploring advancing this concept as a permanent fixture on Bay Street. We are revamping the Beats program to attract digital nomads to our shore. We are forming a partnership with Ottawa, Canada Tech Hub 350, which my colleague, the Minister for Grand Bahama, will speak to in some detail. Additionally, the Ministry of Tourism shortly began artificial intelligence, AI, to identify tourists who are most likely to plan and afford trips to our country. We're merging tourism and technology. This is the future. We're opening the Nassau cruise port at the end of May, and this is going to be the most fantastic cruise port anywhere in the region and perhaps some places in the world. Yes. We're doing many things on Bay Street, but I can talk about that next time. In aviation, Mr. Deputy, we're making significant strides. It goes without saying that aviation is a critical component in our tourism industry. It is the oxygen that tourism needs. And as I indicated earlier, we have a strategy. The Bahamas National Aviation Planning Strategy was comprised by Director of Aviation along with the stakeholders. This is going to exceed global standards, Mr. Deputy. Its primary mandate is to ensure that all initiatives are aligned. And this is what we are going to do, deploying innovative strategies to advance aviation in our country. And you heard about the PPPs on 14 island airports. We have to be creative. The government owns 30 airports in the country. We don't have the resources to develop all of them on our own. So we must, and we have, gone to RFPs to develop 14 of those airports across the country. New Bight, Cat Island, Exuma, Staniel Key, Black Point, Farmers Key, Exuma, Marsh Harbor, Abaco, Treasure Key, Abaco, Sandy Point, Abaco. We ain't forget you, Eleuthera. Thank you. Hallelujah. Naughty Eleuthera. Governor's Harbor. Rock Sound.
Honorable member, are you asking for 5 more minutes? When you mention Eleuthera, you know you get 5 more minutes.
I got more to say about Eleuthera, Mr. Deputy, so maybe 10.
All right.
Overall, this is a $260 million project. The government is using a PPP approach to provide a transparent solution for a brighter future beyond the current challenges and inefficiencies with the Family Island airports. I've watched in pain, Mr. Deputy, all of our tourists and residents arrive to Naughty Eleuthera, standing in the sun and the elements. This isn't going to be a quick fix, but this is going to fix those issues. We're going to invest more money in airports. And I hear the pundits talking about increase in user fees. We're going to release complete details on this, Mr. Deputy, but let me just say, this administration has demonstrated a commitment to the enhancement of the airport fee structures required to increase prospects for profitability, to better justify increasing these capital expenditures. What most don't know and don't focus on at the moment is that the government is already, taxpayers are already subsidizing these airports to the tune of $13 million a year in their current dilapidated state. Whether you use them or not, as a taxpayer, you continue to contribute. We can do better, and we will. Let me say that in the Family Islands, These airports will be a catalyst for growth, a catalyst for jobs and opportunities in construction, in retail, and myriad other businesses. This is going to be a renaissance for aviation in our country, and that is why we're calling it the Family Island Airport Renaissance Program. Resorts have complained, tourists have complained, locals have complained. We can do better, and we will. The new airports will improve runways to allow greater jet traffic into many of these islands, greater traffic after hours, and I believe Lynden Pinland International Airport has been a very successful model, and we promise that we are not going to forget the Family Islands, and therefore we are building new airports to deliver on the promises that we have made and the promises we will keep. We're working with Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Emirates to open new vistas for the Bahamas in the Middle East in tourism, aviation, and investments. And very soon, Qatar Airways will begin in earnest, or they have already begun. They will complete an analysis on Bahamas Air at their cost to give us ideas. Qatar Airways is one of the most successful, most profitable airlines anywhere in the world, and we can learn a few things from them, and that is what we will do. Director of Aviation, very shortly, will roll out the Bahamas Aeronautical Academy, and we are beginning. We're not going to leave it the way we met it. We promise to rebuild, to recover, but in aviation, we can revolutionize.
Yes, yes.
The training will be of international standards. The first cluster of air traffic controllers will begin in this new aeronautical academy. We're taking 30 new air traffic controllers. Since coming to office, we have continued to work on the aviation sector as diligently as we have worked on tourism. Now, Mr. Deputy, I am minded that you've only given me an extra 5 minutes. But I want to talk a little bit to the people of Exuma and Ragged Island. I want them to know that notwithstanding where my duties may take me, notwithstanding that my duties may be national and sometimes international, I want them to know, Mr. Deputy, that I am always working for them. Everywhere I go, I carry a flag, firstly for the Bahamas, but secondly for Exuma and Ragged Island. And I hoist this flag high because I am so grateful to have this occasion to represent my great people of Exumas and Ragged Island. And therefore, I want them to know that we are continuing our work on the 45 miles of nice, smooth road all across the island. The RFPs for potable water in Little Exuma and Baratari and Georgetown repairs have been completed. I want them to know that even though we are not happy with the Water and Sewage Corporation today, that we have sent a new plant to, we've sent a new plant to Exuma, thanks to the chairman of Water and Sewage Corporation. And it's being installed as we speak. Black Point, Daniel Key, Farmers Key. You see, you're getting your new airports. And the Minister of Health has promised me that you're getting your new clinics too. The Minister of Finance has assured me that work on the Exuma International Airport will recommence shortly. The Minister of Education has advised that the new state-of-the-art school in Stanley Key will open before May in 2023. And Ragged Island, I see them making mischief all over the place, but you know you got your new airport terminal already. And you also know that your school and your clinics are progressing, and they're coming next. And of course, Little Exuma, on March 18th, with great excitement, we will be at the grand opening of the Forbes Hill Cultural Village. We promise you that we will restore this forgotten community, and that is what we are doing. Mr. Deputy, the people of the Bahamas should go to bed and rest well, knowing that their fiscal affairs and the stewardship of the government is in good hands. They should go to bed tonight and every night, understanding that where there are pains, this administration feel those pains and will bring relief. They should go to bed tonight and every night thereafter, understanding that tourism is strong and growing. Yes. Investment is strong and getting stronger. Yes. On aviation, we're growing, but we're not just growing. We're revolutionizing, Mr. Deputy. And I'm delighted that the Prime Minister has given me this opportunity to make this significant contribution in making policy and in driving growth and creating opportunities. And likewise, the people of Exumas and Ragged Island. And I hope that God will continue to richly bless them. And may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Yamakura.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to be able to address this honorable body once again as the Member of Parliament for the great constituency of Yamakura and the State Minister for Education and Technical and Vocational Training. I deem it a privilege to be able to serve in this capacity. This position, entrusted to me by the good people of Yamakura and the Prime Minister of this country, provides me with the opportunity to serve my country and to partner with any array of professionals whose main calling is to equip our country's most precious resources with the ability to make meaningful contributions as nation builders. Mr. Speaker, to achieve this education vision, it means that we have to be prepared to address the enhancement of our nation's youth from a holistic point of view. While we know that education must include academic disciplines, we are cognizant of the fact that preparing our young people to survive and thrive in the 21st century will require much more. It will particularly require greater collaboration between the Education Ministry and education stakeholders. In addition to our headquarters and school-based staff, we need our parents, our guardians, our churches, and industry to partner. We are not easily distracted by the distractors, Mr. Speaker. The actors and pretenders know this. That is why they try so hard to find fault in everything we have accomplished in just 17 months, where in contrast, they have done so little over an entire term. It is my hope that even though we know that the opposition wants to be government again, and that they will continually do and say almost anything to cause this to happen, They oppose and criticize everything. They are suddenly the experts in finance, transparency, and accountability while in opposition, never having this while it's in government. They repeat falsehood and untruths intentionally in this place when corrected on record, almost as if they think it will eventually brainwash the Bahamian people. They hope they can repeat a recent act of 2017 of bamboozling the people, that it will work again. We saw this act before. The Bahamian people remember that during their time in government, it was not the people's time. They remember seeing it pasted all over the country, and very soon after they won, the gig was up. A surprise 60% VAT increase, and promise after promise evaporating into thin air. The people's time was all smoke and mirrors. The competent authority told the Bahamian people that they would look out for them in their next term. Mr. Speaker, we will remain focused and we will continue working for the Bahamian people in this term. We have an effective leader and a very strong and capable team, a leader that bravely represents the 242 around the world, lobbying for climate solutions and touting the beauty, strength, and capabilities of the resilient Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, I'm reminded of the scripture, 1 Corinthians 12, verse 14. It tells us that the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Furthermore, verse 17 to 20 directs us that if the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts of one body. Mr. Speaker, this text makes it clear that we must collaborate, partner, and work together in unity. This is critical if we are to advance the national agenda, and more specifically, our educational goals and visions. So I'm thankful for the opportunity that God has granted to me to work alongside all of my elected colleagues from both sides, even both sides of the political divide. I'm also thankful that I've been fortunate to work alongside a great ministry team led by the proven top quality leadership of Minister of Education, the Honorable Glennis Anna Martin, Permanent Secretary Ms. Lorraine Ambrister, and a team at the ministry, along with our Acting Director of Education, Ms. Dominique McCartney-Russell, and a team at the Department of Education. We are all different parts, but one team, one body, working together to achieve the one goal, to give our children a bright future and hope. I would also like to thank my family, particularly, Mr. Speaker, if you would indulge, my wife, Candace Major Lightborn, and my children. Their support and advice and companionship remains a source of immeasurable strength. I consider their presence in my life to be a wonderful blessing from God. Mr. Speaker, this is now my second mid-year budget report that I am presenting as Education State Minister. I deem it a privilege to provide support to our minister and by extension our Prime Minister, particularly in the areas that concern technical and vocational training. And in my contribution today, I will focus on this area. Mr. Speaker, as we know, the COVID-19 pandemic and its subsequent pressures on employment, on the employment sector, further expose the need for us to have greater opportunities available for our students to study careers and technical education, or CTE. These CTE subjects should be offered not only in high schools, but also at the tertiary level in a major way. This point is so critical that we have included technical and vocational education and training, or technical and vocational training, in the name of the Ministry of Education. Mr. Speaker, career and technical education programs continue to thrive in our public schools. We recognize the vital role of these skill sets to fill industry, and we are moving to expose more of our students to the multiplicity of opportunities that are available in technical education. Students continue to study in one of three distinct areas: business studies, family and consumer sciences, or technical studies. It is a well-known fact that children learn by different styles. These are four main types of learning styles. There's visual, there's auditory, there's tactile, and there's kinesthetic. Visual learners learn through seeing. Children who are visual processors tend to observe a parent or teacher's body language and facial expression for content and learn through demonstrations and descriptions. They tend to have well-developed imaginations and think in pictures. Auditory learners learn through listening. Children who are auditory processors learn through participating in discussions and talking things through. Verbal directions may help clarify instructions for written information. Tactile learners learn through touch. Children who are more tactile prefer activities or projects that allow them to use their hands. These children may prefer doodling or drawing to aid memory. Kinesthetic learners learn through moving and doing. Children who are more kinesthetic learn through physical sensation and may have trouble sitting still for long periods of time. A hands-on approach that allows these children to actively explore the physical world helps them learn best. Knowing this, we cannot allow our classrooms to be environments that leave out tactile and kinesthetic learners. The children that are good with their hands and perform best with hands-on learning and an active environment must be given a fair chance to succeed in our educational system. Their pathway must be identified early, and they must have an option for higher learning within their skill set. For us to be successful in educating all Bahamians, we must adopt Stephen Covey's 7 habits and start with the end in mind. Therefore, we have engaged the narrative and underscored the mandate of BTVI, or the Bahamas Technical Vocational Institute, to focus on this institution as the Bahamians' first choice for applied learning and strategic workforce development. This is key to the Bahamian national development. BTVI Pillars of Excellence are intended to strengthen the Institute by building capacity to serve and excel while making successful careers possible. Additionally, the institution must unlock the potential in each individual and the Bahamian economy while connecting with our community and the world and fostering a vibrant and engaging learning environment. Mr. Speaker, the BTVI Board of Directors has continued to work through various subcommittees, of which the board includes human resources, finance, audit and investments, marketing, communications and public relations, policy, accreditation and quality assurance, ground and infrastructure, facilities, and strategic planning, or campus master plans. Mr. Speaker, to expand the opportunities for technical education to more of our Bahamian citizens, the BTVI tuition grant program was increased over the last year by $2 million. It currently stands at $6.6 million. This increase allows us to support the vision of a variety of learning options and deliver methods and experiences for learners that lead to successful career opportunities. It also leads to lifelong learning, upskilling, and career change opportunities. The increase will allow us to build a sustainable institution, place greater focus on environmental sustainability operations and programs, and tap into careers in the sustainability place. We also seek to expand the role and impact on our community, skills gap, labor force needs, and workforce development. Mr. Speaker, BTVI will support new programmatic thrusts with preliminary exploration with local, regional, and international partners in areas such as allied health, environmental technology, orange, green, and blue economies, undergirded by an entrepreneurial thrust, building out and interfacing with small businesses. This is the engine on which our nation and our people will thrive. Mr. Speaker, BTVI has expanded its offerings by creating partnerships, both locally and internationally. It has recently signed a MOU with Nova Scotia Community College in Canada. This college has a built environment facility in which BTVI is interested. This is an area in which BTVI wishes to expand its footprints as it seeks to prepare technical expertise in this sector. BTVI will provide bridges for young people to be exposed to various industry sectors and disciplines through a number of initiatives, including the reintroduction of the Technical Cadet Corps and the resulting partnership with BTVI. I will come back to the Technical Cadet Corps. Promoting the dual enrollment program, which allows students in high school to take credits at BTVI. One such program that was introduced and is now available to high school students is the ICT program, launched on the 26th of January. This program will run through the summer with projected new cohorts to enroll in September 2023. The Smart Start Learning Recovery Program, funding of this an additional of $2 million. There are 2 cohorts nearing completion, one in Grand Bahama and another in New Providence. Additional cohorts are expected to launch at the end of the month in both Grand Bahama and New Providence. BTVI is committed to pushing the envelope and extending the Institute's reach and access to make the program available through dual enrollment. Mr. Speaker, this program will allow students in high school to follow a trades pathway, gain BTVI credits, and become eligible to take international certification through Smart Start programs. The program is currently being reviewed by the Department of Education to determine its eligibility to be considered as an alternate route to high school completion. This would definitely make it a game changer for many students who may have been disengaged from the educational system, especially through COVID-19. The idea is that they would enter the Smart Start program at BTVI and use it as an opportunity to get their high school diploma. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that recruitment is underway to launch Smart Start cohorts in North Andros, Abaco, Moores Island, Eleuthera, Exuma, and Long Island as early as 2023 March, this month. And I did mention Eleuthera just in case I need that later, Mr. Speaker. This thrust augurs well as BTVI is poised to establish a presence throughout the country with BTVI campuses envisioned for Abaco, Exuma, and Eleuthera in the first instance, with an additional site envisioned for Grand Bahama. Classes in the interim will be conducted in collaboration with various departments of education. I'd like to pause to announce that presently going on, Mr. Speaker, work is being carried out as we speak to the site on the hill of the old Greencastle Primary School building in Eleuthera, which will be a new BTVI campus, giving access for BTVI subjects to South Eleuthera, to South and Central Eleuthera. Madam Speaker, we are committed to upgrading our Grand Bahama campuses to repair damage that has occurred due to Hurricane Dorian. $268,153 is paid for major capital works and expenses related to the general maintenance of existing facilities and major equipment. We are proposing upgrades and repairs on the following campuses. Grand Bahama campus will have electrical work repair, building environment renovations, main building and annexes, additional office furniture, classroom furniture, lab furniture and equipment, and these will be sourced for BTVI campus as soon as possible. Additional funding is also being accessed to assist the work required in Grand Bahama, Northern Bahamas campus, through the CDB loan funding, just over $2 million. It is expected that the tender bidding process should begin shortly, and work at the campus is expected to be underway in the next 2 months. Mr. Speaker, the capital works required to enhance the instructional labs and workspaces is critical to meet the fundamental standards, and this amount is pegged at $1.4 million. Capital works and technology infrastructure upgrades have been undertaken and are continuing as the Institute has transitioned from virtual to face-to-face delivery. The BTVI board and management has recognized the urgency of maintaining standards critical to meeting industry and international programmatic thresholds. Indeed, the improvements in the IT infrastructure and upgrades in technology are vital in ensuring the currency of academic programming and related operations. Mr. Speaker, modernizing the infrastructure, technologies, and instructional systems that drive innovation in the trades, particularly in New Providence and Grand Bahama, is the key thrust of the Bahamas Technical Vocational Institute. Meanwhile, focus on instructional sites throughout the Family Islands will be put in place as BTVI builds out and expands its footprint, and some of those islands I mentioned earlier will see the addition of other islands having campus sites. It is critical that we seek to put support in place to realize the real and authentic distributed learning solutions. So modernizing ITC or ICT at BTVI is critical in this regard. This includes IT Smart Start campuses and electronic document management. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to human resource matters. We'll touch on concerns that we'll touch on the concerns of personnel at BTVI. I am pleased to report that just this week, just last week, Mr. Speaker, we were able to successfully sign off on a new industrial agreement that will benefit the non-managerial and non-instructional staff at BTVI. Member for St. Barnabas union busting. One agreement they signed. We signed 16 and going. This is the first industrial agreement ever negotiated.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Barnabas.
Mr. Deputy, the honorable member continues to distort. The honorable member continues to distort my view. The union, it was the union that said that the government was guilty of union busting. That's right. Not this member. So if the member has an issue with those words, he needs to take it up. He needs to take it up with the union that said that they were guilty of union busting.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakoro.
Mr. Speaker, the good member, I will allow the member to take me down this road. I don't know if he wants to go down this road, though. There are many unions in this country. There are many unions in this country. It's clear that your focus is still only on one union because only one agreement you signed over your entire term. So today you
the
only
chair
voted for
recognizes
one
the honorable
union.
member for St. Barnabas.
How much?
The honorable member made a statement and said that I said that they were guilty of union busting, right? I said that the union, the Bahamas Public Services Union, said that they were guilty of union busting. And so the member needs to decease and come up with some other reasons, all right, to desist and to stop it, all right? He needs to desist. He talked about initially in his argument about being honest and upfront. So be intellectually honest.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, the member is taken from my time. They have signed one. He brought up union busting. He adopted the article. He quoted one union over and over again in this place. And now he wants to flee from his own words because there's a point of order. There's no point of being shamed. And if you are, all you have to do is stand and admit your guilt and give kudos to this government for signing more than 16 union agreements.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Barnabas.
You know, the government continues to to paint a certain picture. And the Bahamian people are having a different experience out there, Mr. Deputy. And so again, no matter how the member for Yamakura tries to engage again in these verbal gymnastics, the truth is that the Bahamas Public Services Union said that the government was guilty of union busting. And if you have an issue with that, you need to take it up with the Bahamas Public Services Union and not this member. So, also, Mr. Deputy, signing whatever agreements does not negate the fact that in that moment they may have been guilty of union busting. So speak to the union, Mr. Deputy.
Mr. Deputy, the fact is that they signed one, and they had to sign that under duress. They signed one. That's a fact. That we signed 16 and running. And it doesn't only mean sign, including the union that you've mentioned. We signed agreements and have more to sign with other agencies that fall under them. So just in case you need to be reminded, you signed one, we are still signing agreements and we only 17 months in. You had 4.5 years. The numbers don't lie. This is the first industrial agreement negotiated with BTVI.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've seen on multiple occasions a member of one of the unions that was particularly aggressive against the past administration appearing in the gallery of this House of Assembly. It's no surprise to me that after they won this election, they're coming around and signing a lot of agreements you We have to look at this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have to look at this for what it is. You have a party that made commitments and has been and has to, Mr. Deputy Speaker, stand by those commitments now that those union members supported them against the last administration and brought them in. This is nothing to be proud about. If you looked at this with clear lens, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you might see this for something else. But we support all Bahamians, whether they're part of a union in the private sector or small business entrepreneurs. And we're not against the unions getting what they've asked for. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this administration's done it for a reason, and at times they've even been called union busters by the unions. It's nothing to brag about. It's the people's money that they're signing on with.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakura.
Again, there's no point of hurt feelings. The fact they did not engage the unions. They ran through back doors.
This is like the Bermuda
They have now launched attack again on the union because the unions show up in the gallery. And I thought that was a cheap blow by St. Anne's because the unions are used to these cheap blows. The first industrial agreement ever negotiated between BTVI on behalf of the government and the Bahamas General Workers Union was just recently signed. The initial cost for this BTVI agreement is, for this BTVI Bahamas General Workers Union is estimated to be $157,000. That is money in the hands of the workers of this country. This 3-year agreement commences July 1st, 2022. Is retroactive and includes or continues to 2025. The term of this agreement grants the staff members new and improved salaries, enhanced leave benefits and allowances. Additionally, these staff members are receiving merit pay increases to be applied to the base for the life of the agreement. The agreement provides clearly defined protocols for scheduling of BTVI employees, regularization, performance reviews, promotions, transfers, and discipline and discharge guidelines. We are pleased with the outcome of negotiations and believe this agreement will solidify an atmosphere of good industrial harmony relations between BTVI and Bahamas General Workers Union. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the rebranding and relaunch of the Technical Cadet Corps program I mentioned earlier. The Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training is excited to be in a position to bring greater focus to career and technical and educational training throughout the country, particularly through focus on the Technical Cadet Corps program. The ministry is seeking to reintroduce and relaunch the Technical Cadet program currently housed on the BTVI campus. The original vision of the program was intended to attract students with an interest in STEM programs only. For example, mechanical, radio, and television engineering, and more academic tracks only. The years passed, the program recognized consistent enrollment and similarly consistent scholarship offerings for participation, with the intention of ensuring the participants were able to obtain positions in the Bahamas labor market and thus bolster the Bahamian economy. The rebranding and relaunch of the TCCP, or Technical Cadet Program, will signify increased program diversities and will provide tiered tracks of exposure for a cross-section of students participants. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that this September 2023, the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training will launch an upskilling initiative to equip Bahamian students to lead the Bahamian economy. Under new leadership and with a new mandate, Team Technical Cadet Corps program will engage students in a cadre of practical training opportunities with direct implications for labor market demands. Track 1 will provide courses geared towards students with interests in engineering branches, matriculating to tertiary course of studies. Track 2 will provide exposure to students to courses and with technical inclination in a variety of content areas aligned with entry-level employment opportunities. Mr. Speaker, this relaunch will be strategic as it will target specific interests and skill sets with projected participation from 10 public schools. The entry requirements will be modified to ensure that a cross-section of students are able to access the program, and we anticipate that it will have direct impact on industry. It is therefore critical that we engage the support of corporate partners, as private-public sector partners are critical if we will continue to see economic empowerment and expansion as a nation. Mr. Speaker, I wish to share our projected timeline for relaunch. And because I'm running out of time, I'll just give a highlight on some of them. This month, March 2023, the following will occur. The budget projections will be finalized, cabinet approval will be sought, and recruitment partnership engagement meetings will be carried out. Curriculum program will be finalized. Scheduling of classes will be carried out. Between the 17th to the 30th July 2023, teachers will be engaged and transport contracts will be finalized. On September 5th, 2023, there will be a math placement test, and finally, on September 11th, 2023, Technical Cadet Corps program this year, training begins. Mr. Speaker, whilst TCCP has benefited thousands over the years with both training and scholarship opportunities, the intent is not only to attract, but address the student retention mechanism. That is to say, we would like our students who are benefiting from the program to receive scholarships, and in receiving scholarships to return to the Bahamas after they have graduated and utilize their training to enhance the Bahamian economy. Mr. Speaker, the relaunch and the rebranding of the TCCP program will require a financial injection of $355,000 in year 1. There is a projected $25,000 increase to this baseline for year 2 and again in year 3. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that this new TCCP will ensure that all participating students are granted the opportunity to exit the program with up to 6 professional certifications, all recognized by industry. These certifications will allow them to gain access to employment immediately, or they can be credited towards tertiary studies. While a tiered approach will be used, one certification building on the other, each certification can act as a standalone qualification with recognized employment value. This program is being relaunched under the guidance of a new administrator in the person of Linda Evans, who comes to us as a highly qualified career and technical educator with academic training in the field of accounting. Ms. Evans, over the years, has trained thousands of Bahamian students, and we are confident in her leadership in this new technical program. Madam Speaker, these are exciting times in education, and indeed for career and technical education and training. Mr. Speaker, lack of employment opportunities for young people around the world constitutes serious challenges. The Bahamas is faced with nothing different. In response to these challenges, the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training have developed a national program that focuses on enhancing youth employability and on providing incentives to encourage enterprise to hire young people. We are pleased to announce that approval has been granted for the establishment of a national apprenticeship task force to oversee and create the regulatory and policy framework for a national apprenticeship program for the Bahamas. This partnership is being done with the Ministry of Labor, and I commend the Minister of Labor and his team. There is increasing recognition of key roles of apprenticeship and how we can play roles in how apprenticeship can play roles in enabling young people to acquire relevant competencies to facilitate their transition from the world of education to the world of work. Our 12th grade students and other recent school leavers will have the opportunity to enroll in this program, which is intended to prepare them for full-time occupation. The two key definitions, or the two key defining features, will be the classroom instruction to enable apprentices to acquire a full range of competencies needed for a particular occupation, as well as national or international recognized certification they will receive. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, I would like 2 more minutes. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training is overseeing what will ultimately become a change in the way we process school leavers. This program goes beyond the normal job readiness program and will be the vehicle that many young persons use to catapult them into entry-level positions with pay into various sectors and eventually other levels of career opportunities. Mr. Speaker, at a glance around the world shows an increasing number of countries are focusing on the development of improvement of apprenticeship systems and programs. These efforts have taken many forms to ensure their efficient functioning. Like us, these countries have inter alia amended legislation, carried out reviews, or recognized administrative structures to ensure proper framework is in place for an apprenticeship program. Mr. Speaker, as I close, I would like to mention the Bahamas Polytechnic Institute. The Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training is excited about a new perspective on careers in technical and vocational education and training, and our efforts to repurpose an existing infrastructure for an innovative educational experience. The Bahamas' first Polytechnical Institute of Excellence is identified as an institution transforming academic to application and in efforts to bridge employment gaps. Mr. Speaker, as a Polytechnical Institute, the site will be serving as an upskilling hub for Bahamian students. The students may opt to be a part of the Academy for Information, the Academy for Hospitality, or the Academy for Construction, all providing highly specialized sector training supported by certifications that validate training content. Mr. Speaker, as I said, these are exciting times for careers in technical and vocational education and training. We are building bridges, closing gaps, one student at a time. As we empower our nation by empowering our future, may God bless our education ministry. May God bless our Prime Minister, Brave Davis, and all members of Parliament, and this New Day government. May God bless the good people of Yamacraw, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Member for Kalani, there's no color for the gallery. No color code. Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, I'm grateful to God, the residents of Marco City, the delegates of our convention, and for this rare opportunity to once again be in the Parliament of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Deputy, I ask on our behalf that you please convey our love and well wishes to Madam Speaker and let her know that we are praying for her speedy recovery and return. This morning, much like each time we meet, many families across our country, Mr. Deputy, are grieving for the loss of loved ones, and we grieve with them. So many deaths, so much sorrow, but we thank God for his grace and healing power and to provide peace in the midst of our storm. This morning, Mr. Deputy, I wish to extend condolences on my behalf, my wife, Burley's daughter, Michaela, the Marco City and the Free National Movement family, to the families of the following outstanding Bahamians who we have lost recently: Commodore Leon Smith, Samuel Lester Dawkins, Christopher Hamilton, Coach Gregory Monroe, Kenva Maida, Ivan Russell Jr., MCM Roosevelt Curry, Ann Burroughs, Norma Russell's family continue to grieve, having lost loved ones just recently also. V.C. Colbert's son, Samson Napier, Eleanor Bain, Charles Bethel, Yvonne McDonald, Mercedes Sands Parker. Mr. Deputy, in much the same way there is the grief of loss, in the cycle of life, we also celebrate new births and, of course, birthdays. And so we wish to give a shout out to Antoinette Jones, Harold Adderley, who incidentally recently celebrated his 38th year of marriage. Beryl Ferguson, Everett Jackson. Mr. Deputy Everett is from San Salvador. And once again, we appeal for assistance with the water situation in San Salvador. Peter Murray and all of those who celebrated in the month of February and March. And of course, I join my colleagues who have celebrated Sunland Stingers, Sunland Baptist Academy, once again prevail as the champions of Hugh Campbell. A few of us in here, of course, we're attached to Hugh Campbell by virtue of being graduates of A.F. Adley Senior High School. I believe the Minister of Sports is a graduate. He came years after me. I believe he came when we were wearing green and white. And then, of course, I also want to, in celebrating Sunland Baptist Academy, we also celebrate Jubilee Cathedral and the Williams family for their tireless work in sustaining the school. But to all of the players, coaches, teachers, administrators, sponsors who assisted the students, we once again salute them for an incredible job. We also congratulate all of the teams who participated, including the Rattlers, who was the runner-up in the Hugh Campbell tournament. And we also salute Pine Forest Academy for winning the Andrus Basketball Association tournament, which occurred over the midterm break. And the senior team from Pine Forest did exceptionally well in winning 4 regular games and the championship. Both of those schools are in Marco City. I think we have the largest complement of schools, I believe, in Grand Bahama. And I want to say a good morning to all of the students and administrators and teachers. Mr. Deputy, one of the things I've learned in being engaged in public work, that you have to do this work as if unto God. If you do it for recognition or the hope that some good deed is going to result in votes, you are setting yourself up for a painful experience in public life. The truth is, we live in a culture, oftentimes you are as good as your last good deed. And so it is important for us to dedicate ourselves to being servants of our people and doing it as if you're doing a work unto God. So, Mr. Deputy, I once again encourage colleagues that we ought to remain humble and grounded. I believe it was T.D. Jakes who admonished us that we should not get drunk on people's praise. If we don't get drunk on their praise, we'll certainly be in a better position to cope with when those same tongues switch and engage in condemnation. And so only for a moment, Mr. Deputy, I embrace that good feeling you get when you hear the roaring crowds. But I'm mindful that for every screaming crowd, there's a group of people waiting to boo. This is how we are, unfortunately. As we move about, some heap lavish compliments on you for what they call your contributions. In fact, some go as far to talk about some members in this place about their greatness. And the moment that member begins to stick out his chest or his head begins to swell, he would sometimes hear, let me hold on a slow 20, when faded 50 or when wrinkled 100. The truth is that when a tax follows a compliment, it could leave you quite deflated. You know, the goose in goes before the tax. Why am I saying this, Mr. Deputy? I'm making this point because I listened to the bombing on the desk in this parliament. It's absolutely amazing. Members opposite, members of the government believe that the loudness of the chairs and the beating on the desk make their claims accurate. Today, for a brief while, Mr. Deputy, I wish to outline how we have witnessed their cheering, particularly when the member for Kid Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador in June gave his presentation and just last week followed up with the midterm budget communication. But a simple, short fact-checking of that message revealed some troubling trends in his manner of communication. Mr. Deputy, in a sense, in this place, we often hear glowing speeches from the New Day government. And yes, they are greeted with these thunderous applause, only to find out that the figures are often wrong, the promise of relief is often overstated, and often even big policy announcements are all recycled intentions. And the supposed revelations of scandals are drip-feeding exercises by a desperate administration who attempts to create distractions from their failing to keep the light on, failing in many instances to supply consistent water supply, whether it's in Eleuthera. And Mr. Deputy, let me express my gratitude for you being responsive when I reach out. I can't say that for the person you report to. Mr. Deputy, Abaco, San Salvador all have very serious water needs. But the distractions that the Prime Minister often seeks to create does not stop the failure to provide ease of doing business, or the pressures that have been heaped on small businesses, or failure to follow the law, even as they choose to prosecute FNMs while nullying cases for their friends, or failing to reach settlements with ordinary Bahamians who have had medical challenges that required compensation, or land issues.
The chair recognized the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
I think the leader of the opposition is on dangerous grounds. And I would just advise him to be careful when he's talking about nollying for friends. He must understand that the DPP is an independent individual, a professional, a great Bahamian who has served them well when they were in government and now serve us. Many of these decisions come based on the merit, and I would urge him not to put in question the integrity of our professionals or the integrity of our judicial system. I just ask him to be patriotic on this point.
Thank you, honorable member.
Patriotic on all points, and I don't need admonition from you in that regard. This is an administration that is quite determined by whatever means, by whatever means they desire.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exum and Ragged Island.
Mr. Deputy, I ask that the member withdraw the point of Nollies for our friends, or if he refuses to be responsible.
We'll have it
in doing
stricken
so.
from the record.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
This government seeks to create distractions from their failure to apply the law equally to all Bahamians. That while they are busy seeking to prosecute FNMs, they are quite busy. The political directorate is quite busy finding pathways to make sure friends of theirs who are already charged will not see their day in court. What is the point of order?
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exum and Ragged Island.
Deputy, you've expunged it, and he's put it back on the record, Mr. Deputy. He ought to know better. He's been here before, Mr. Deputy. He ought to be more responsible.
It is not true.
And I ask that you so expunge what he's just put on the record, Mr.
Mr. Deputy, Mr. Deputy, you are in charge of this house. You are in charge of this house. I restated what I said. It is my perception. It is my view that when a minister of the government seeks to take possession of files and he's asked to reduce the request to writing and declines to do so, I'm talking about a minister. So I'm talking about a minister the same way the prime minister talked last week about a number of matters which I will come to and refused to give a single name. So Mr. Deputy, this administration is quite interested in making sure that one group of Bahamians face the legal system while others do not. This administration. That's the point that I'm making, Mr. Deputy. And so many citizens, Mr. Deputy, are seeking financial settlements. If they had an unfortunate experience in their interaction with the healthcare system, or their properties were acquired through eminent domain or otherwise. Meanwhile, this administration is quite busy settling matters, some of which never reach the court. They are settling and have the audacity to do so in secrecy. In secrecy, as if the people of the Bahamas are not entitled to know how their funds are being spent, particularly compensating public servants who are gatekeepers. And we need to be assured that the discharge of their duty would not be influenced by any settlement they would have received. That's this administration. So when they make pronouncements, we only need look at what is it that they're trying to distract the public from. And every time they are under duress, which is quite frequently now, they come drip feeding on some supposed scandal. But when you fact check them, the information is faulty, like it was as it relates to immigration. No, there's only been one landing in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Then as they talk, the more they talk, additional landings seem to creep up. There have been a record number. Never before in the history of the country have we repatriated so much. Proud. However, they were wrong. Off by some 4 other years that there were larger numbers of repatriation than the figures that they mentioned. And I read it into the record and held up the book. Well, yeah, you wouldn't know the truth if you saw it. And so,
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakoro.
The member's misleading the public. That has already been addressed and dealt with in this House. And the member for Carmichael clarified that the record that they had was incorrect and added some numbers.
He never said it.
So yes, he identified the breakdown. So the member should withdraw that statement that he made because it is untrue.
Thank you, honorable
It is
member.
untrue.
It is not true. So, Mr. Deputy, I will continue. Let me just say, let's just say he's being untruthful and inaccurate at the same time. The Prime Minister, in our view, is squandering an opportunity to capitalize on a Bahamian economy that is roaring back from a crippling pandemic and a Category 5 Hurricane Dorian, which knocked offline 2 of the 3 economic centers in the Bahamas. I listened to the member talk about tourism growth. Let me say, Mr. Deputy, the pent-up demand from those countries that have historically supplied tourists to the Bahamas accounted in large measure to our good fortune of millions of tourists returning to our shores, particularly from the eastern seaboard. And Mr. Deputy, this dramatic increase in tourists resulted in available resources that, if managed and deployed properly, would augur well for the growth and development of our economy. What would the additional resources from increased tourism provide? 1, it could spur sustained economic growth, take care of much of our recurring expenditure, improve deteriorating infrastructure, better service our debt, address critical national issues, provide a safety net for the most vulnerable among us while helping to retool our workforce. Alas, though, Mr. Speaker, we are not managing the increased resources effectively. I found it interesting, the member for Exuma and Ragged Island gave a wonderful quote this morning that is so applicable for this administration. He said that while in opposition, he challenged the then government to focus on economic growth rather than the boogeyman of corruption. Oh my gosh, how wonderful for him to restate it for the Prime Minister and for members of this New Day government. Focus on economic growth rather than the boogeyman of corruption. And then he went on to say that the list of financial services regulations that were put in place were not fit for purpose, hence their failure to comply with the law. Excuses.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Deputy, he was going well until he said, hence us not complying with the law. I asked him to withdraw that phrase, or I ask you to strike it, Mr. Deputy. We won't leave untruths on the record today.
I'm going to carefully go through, and if you're satisfied after I've talked about the procurement law, the debt service management law, the violation of the Central Bank Act, the Housing Act, the Ministry of Transport Act, if Mr. Deputy, I have not made the case, by all means, but what I said is correct. This administration since the 21st. Can you stop the clock? Because he's on his feet, please.
Yeah. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
The member has misquoted me, Mr. Deputy. I asked for your ruling on the matter. I asked him to withdraw it, or I asked you to expunge it, Mr. Deputy.
Mr. Deputy, this administration is in violation of multiple financial services regulation. All of us have been in here long enough to know that they're in violation of the Procurement Act, including the member for Exuma and Ragged Island. And he was in the parliament at the time when it was passed and voted for it, but have not complied with it for more than a year.
For your ruling on this matter, he has misquoted me. The member has put erroneous information on the record of the House. I've asked him to withdraw it. I've asked you to expunge it, Mr.
Honorable member, are you going to withdraw?
Withdraw what, Mr. Deputy? So I can hear. What is it? Withdraw what, Mr. Deputy?
The quote.
Inaccurately.
What is it?
I said X, Y, and Z, and therefore,
I never said
Mr. Deputy, I'm not here to pleasure him today, Mr. Deputy. What I ask of you is to strike the reference that the member made as to what I said was a reason for not complying with certain legislation.
You'll have that stricken from the record.
Mr. Deputy, what exactly is being stripped from the record? What is being stricken? What is being stricken? What is being stricken? What is being stricken? Help me understand that. Because we're going to have a problem today if he can get up and talk nonsense about X, Y, and Z, and we don't even know what the hell he's talking about. What is X, Y, and Z?
The member for Marco City. just use a most unparliamentary language. What the hell, or something to that effect, Mr. Member. I asked that children are watching this, Mr. Deputy. I asked that he control himself, right? Because people are looking up to us as leaders, Mr. Deputy. You've made a ruling on the matter. Something he said. If he needs to be refreshed in what he said only 4 minutes ago, that's on him, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Mr. Deputy, we are going down a dangerous road when the member seeks to bully the chair by failing to even refer to what I've said. I made the point that the same member is guilty, he's guilty of not complying with a series of financial services legislation. Guilty, not complying with the Procurement Act, not complying with the Debt Management Service Act, not complying with the Central Bank Act, and I intend to lay out the case. I'm entitled to lay out the case.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Despite his irresponsible comments earlier, he's now gone further, and he said this member has broken the law. It's a very serious allegation, Mr. Deputy. He must either now substantiate that, or he must withdraw it. And if he refuses to do so in his irresponsibility, I ask you to once again expunge it.
Mr. Deputy, we have asked this administration in your presence on multiple occasions, this administration inclusive of all of the ministers, all ministers of your administration, all members of your administration, including the member for Ragged Island, and I will not withdraw it. So, Mr. Deputy, the procurement law, the Procurement Act requires that this government.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
He's in bad form today, Mr. Deputy. He's not remembering what he said 30 seconds before. He accused this member. He said this member, referring to Exuma, has broken the law. That's what he said.
One member on
I'm
the floor,
asking him
please.
to withdraw it, not blow more smoke around it. Withdraw it, or I ask you to expunge it, Mr. Deputy.
Okay.
Every
Are you going to withdraw?
Let me finish the point.
Okay.
Every member of this House who's in charge of a corporation is obligated by law to ensure that their ministry, their corporation, their board publish all of the contracts. And I'm saying that all of the members in here with those responsibilities, inclusive of the member for Ragged Island and Exuma, have refused to have their ministry, their board, put on the public record the contracts which they have issued since coming to office. That is the point that I made. That's exactly the point. You know exactly the point that I made. You know the exact point that I made.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
The member said that this member, referring to Exuma, has broken the law. I asked him to withdraw it. Or I ask you to expunge it, Mr. Deputy.
Are you going to withdraw, Honorable Member?
This way. The government of which the member is a part, the government
Members.
of which the member is a part, have failed to disclose since coming to government. They are in violation of the Procurement Act.
Okay. Honorable Member?
Yes.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bimini.
I think the member for Exuma has explained himself. The member for Marco fully understands. That is why he has revised what he said earlier. But what we're asking, member, is to simply withdraw what you said specifically about the member for Exuma.
Mr. Deputy, I have restated the point made earlier that the government of which he is a part is in fact guilty. And so that is the statement I wish to leave on the record.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair...
Mr. Deputy, have it taken off the record.
You're looking for distraction, but here's the reality.
Minute, hold on, Marco. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I understand the challenge that non-legal people may have with reading acts of Parliament, but this is the House of Assembly where we pass laws, and the side opposite passed the Procurement Act that puts no responsibility on any political person and puts all the responsibility on public servants. They may not have realized it when they passed the law, but that is what they did. And I would invite him to read any section of the Procurement Act in your hearing that says that any minister must do anything.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We will have that expunged from the record.
Again, Mr. Deputy, let me show you the consistent inaccuracy in what is stated. I turn my attention for a moment to the fiasco which occurred just last week with respect to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister indicated that the deficit was up in his earlier statement on February 22nd. Again, when he returned on March 1st, he sought to indicate that the deficit had in fact decreased by some 5.3 million. When challenged by the member for East Grand Bahama, the Prime Minister then corrected himself, but failed to explain several things. One, he never apologized for misleading the Parliament in terms of the figures he gave. The Prime Minister had an entire week. He misled the Parliament, he misled the country, he misled the international community. And for an entire week, the Prime Minister left on the record one figure indicating that while revenue was up, the deficit was also up. But he came back a week later, having not corrected that misstatement. The Prime Minister owes this public an apology. Then he did something even more egregious. He sought to blame the media. Well, he also blamed his speechwriter, and I guarantee you they're still employed. And so, again, Mr. Deputy, the Prime Minister has to be extremely careful when he is giving figures that have an impact on the minds of creditors, of those investors, as well as rating agencies. But again, Mr. Speaker, even now, they have not come back and explained how they arrived at those
for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Deputy, the Prime Minister is on record. He indicated that there was an error.
Two members on the floor. 1 minute. Yeah, thank you.
He indicated that there was an error, and he indicated that in his most recent presentation, what he presented was the correction and the correct version of what he intended to say previously. So it is not true to say that he did not make the correction, which in fact he did. The member, I've clarified, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
A week passed and the Prime Minister refused to correct the record. And I know the qualified persons in the Ministry of Finance would have advised either of the administration on what the facts were. And during that entire period, the Prime Minister refused to correct it. He only corrected it in true New Day fashion. When called out, is the only time they seek to give a half-hearted explanation. Mr. Deputy.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Just so that the record is clear, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, has stated in his presentation on Monday the correct analysis of the deficit. And if there's any question in the public or in the mind of the Leader of the Opposition, he might feel free to reflect on that speech, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
I remind the public, the Prime Minister allowed a week to pass, and today we are still unclear on which of those are accurate. Now we believe that the deficit has in fact increased because of the lavish spending of this administration. The second area.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
I will leave this point, Mr. Deputy, but so that there's absolute clarity. There is no misinterpretation of the Prime Minister's presentation on Monday past. It's on the record, it's been released to the press. The press carried the correct version, and that stands. I invite the member not to try to continue to muddy the water on an issue that he says that he says is important for international consumption, yet he continues down this path. The Prime Minister has clarified, he's made himself clear, he said there was an error, and he's corrected it. Let's move on.
Thank you, honorable member.
In fact, the same media that the member for Exuma refers to talked about the contradiction in the statements and the fact that the Prime Minister, rather than apologizing, which would have been the correct thing to do, doubled down on it. No, it's the same matter. It's much like the FNM having been accused of not participating in the independence movement of our country, and when called out and found out, refused to apologize to Sir Arthur Folks and Sir Orville Turnquest. It's the same attitude, that you're able to distort history and not apologize because you are bigger than history and the facts. Again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the second issue is when the Prime Minister was seeking in his statement, just on the 1st of March, to lead the public to believe that he had uncovered yet another major scandal. So one of the things he talked about was that the figures collected by Omni relative to immigration payments made, that here was a company, here's a company that was not licensed, He referenced a company that he said was not licensed. I want to put on the record that the company was in fact licensed by Central Bank. I withdraw the name. The company was licensed. The company was licensed by Central Bank. It was licensed by Central Bank, contrary to the assertion of the Prime Minister, who, through their black ops, had already put out the name. So if you want to be cute, I will do the responsible thing. You all haven't. So what they did, Mr. Deputy,
Order, members.
is they sought to mislead the country into believing that the FNM administration had a company collecting money that was not licensed to do so, which is untrue. The company was licensed by the Central Bank. Let me go further. He also contended that it was the only service provider, when the facts are there are at least three other service providers. And I could go through the names of the additional service providers. No, it's not at the time. Not at the time. There were at least three other service providers that are well known in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, but the Prime Minister refused to indicate who those service providers were. And so absolutely sure. So that's the second point the Prime Minister misled the House on and misled the country on. The third thing the Prime Minister misled the country on, Mr.
Honorable members.
The third thing the Prime Minister misled the country on is he sought to give the impression that the 7.2 million or so that had accumulated as arrears occurred under the former administration. What the Prime Minister failed to say was, one, the company was licensed by Central Bank and they knew it, and I believe the Prime Minister or his speechwriters knew it at the time he said it. Secondly, there were more than one service providers. In fact, we have, I'll just call the names of other service providers, Mr. Deputy. One of them was Money Max, Sun Cash, and Cash to Go. These were three additional service providers. All of them did some degree of business with government departments. All of them did business. So the Prime Minister sought to give the impression that these companies, that there was only one company, when he knew there were four companies. The other thing that he sought to do is to convince the public that $7.2 million had been accumulated under the former administration, when, Mr. Deputy, the $7.2 million had been accumulated under his administration in 2022. We asked this administration to lay on the table of the House the record to show the arrears accumulated in 2021 prior to the general election, to verify the assertion made by the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. Lay the document so that we could see that the arrears accumulated under the past administration. It was most disingenuous to give the impression that an unlicensed corporation was given a job, that they were the only operator, and furthermore, that the arrears was accumulated. In other words, that we left the money out there with plans for something else. When he must have known, I'm now, it's my words. The bottom line is, the Prime Minister or his speechwriters must have known, because they have all of the records to know that the arrears were accumulated under this administration in 2022.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
No doubt, Mr. Deputy, the Ministry of Finance will lay the facts clear on this issue. I take exception to the point of the attributing to the Prime Minister that he indicated that they left the money out there to be used for something untoward. The Prime Minister, he's never, you take whatever impression you want. Take whatever impression you want. The Prime Minister did not say that.
Thank you, honorable member.
So this administration that talks a great deal about transparency and accountability failed to do their job in terms of addressing any outstanding funds. It is our hope that they would in fact resolve it. This is the same administration.
Order, members.
This is the same administration that now insists under their amendments that you have a confidentiality clause introduced into the Public Finance Management Act. But at the same time, they are quite busy taking out penalties out of the act for persons who misuse government funds. And we wonder why. I thought the member for East Grand Bahama litigated this very well. Why would you not want a penalty for persons who wrongly use government funds? Could it be related, for example, Mr. Deputy, to the fact that this administration illegally took possession of funds from central bank that they had no entitlement to and no right to borrow, which is why they had to come back with a view of amending the Central Bank Act, another example of this administration violating the law. Could they be concerned that they had jeopardy for having done that, knowing full well that there is a penalty under the law for taking possession of the 232 million or some portion thereof of the special drawing rights? So, Mr. Deputy, that is a clear example of how this administration functions. Violates the law, and then through linguistic gymnastics, try to excuse themselves as if they are not a part of that. They did it with the Procurement Act. They did it with the Central Bank Act. They did it with the Housing Act. And we've already asserted the Minister of Housing, as a corporate soul, the one challenge she has is she does not have the ability, or no minister of housing has the ability to borrow under the Housing Act. And yet, this administration, with all of its cases, continue to return to make this case, that they are within the law. Mr. Deputy, they continue to mislead this public in terms of how they apply the law to one group of persons, Mr. Deputy, and to FNMs, and to others they apply differently. Mr. Deputy, as I wrap up, and I'm going to need a few more minutes, Mr. Deputy. Is it possible? Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Deputy. This administration, Mr. Deputy, in its recent budget communication, failed to address one critical issue that I wish to raise, and this has to do with developing a growth economy. The member for Exuma and Ragged Island made an excellent point, that there is a need to be focused on economic growth. The problem is, what he said to the FNM government, he refuses to say to his own administration. They have refused to provide the requisite funding for small businesses, the credit required in order for these businesses to thrive, Mr. Deputy. We have asked them to lay on the table, whether through the Bahamas Development Bank or through the SPDC, where are the funds that they have earmarked for small business development. To date, we have not seen the funds. This administration, Mr. Deputy, have refused to take the burden of small businesses, and they have, by making small businesses an extension of their enforcement arm, having to pursue landlords for information to provide to government in order for them to simply get their business licenses. This is not a government focused on growing this economy. In fact, the VAT receipts that they brag about, they refuse to say that possibly as much as $200 million of those VAT receipts are due to inflation on the backs of struggling Bahamians. At the end of the day, Mr. Deputy, this administration has not demonstrated a commitment to the development of the small business sector. Mr. Deputy, if we are going to achieve the revenue that this government has indicated they hope to get at the end of this cycle, at the end of the day, they have not accounted for the reforms which they ought to be making. Small state-owned enterprises, Mr. Deputy, continue to be bloated with extra hiring of persons who, in many instances, Mr. Deputy, some of whom have already retired, some of those persons who are being hired could be issued contracts through the appropriate means rather than bloating state-owned enterprises with persons as if it is an employment agency. Secondly, this government promised to reduce the amount of money that would be made available to state-owned enterprises. They have failed to do that as well, Mr. Deputy. The question is, Mr. Deputy, why is it that the Prime Minister and several of his ministers continue to speak with different tongues on the same issue? NIB is one example, Mr. Deputy. The member in the office of the Prime Minister indicated that there would be an increase. The Prime Minister, on the other hand, Mr. Deputy, has indicated that he has not yet settled on the matter. And in fact, that's an adjustment on his position. What he said earlier is they did not intend to put any additional burden on the backs of Bahamians. The member for Fort Challen indicated that there was an intention to increase the fuel charge by 2.5 cents. The Prime Minister came back and made the point that there was no there was no intention to do so. As a result of the contradiction between the Prime Minister and the member for Fort Charlotte, what resulted is a 163% increase in fuel charge and 35% increase on electricity for ordinary Bahamians. And so, Mr. Deputy, the Prime Minister has an obligation on the matters I raise. He owes an apology for misstating and failing to acknowledge publicly that he had misled the Parliament on the matters that I raised earlier. And with those words, Mr. Deputy, I say there's one rule for the PLP and there's a different rule for other Bahamians.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
I'd just like to ask the member to look at this picture. It speaks for itself. Right? This picture speaks to itself. It is a signing of the constitutional documents in London. I'll say no more about that. And let me put it right here. You can see who all were present at that time. I'll say no more about that. It's clear. It's clear that.
Yeah, 1 minute, Marco City. Let him finish.
I'm on point about it.
Yeah.
I'm on point about it. I'm on the point about it, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to go down the road that the member, because obviously something is happening this morning I don't quite follow. The eye is not listening. I never called any company name. I heard he called, I intentionally didn't call any name. Right? He called them.
I hold no brief for them. If he holds brief for them, perhaps he could help us get our money back. Right? But I stand by what I said about the company that's collected the money. The company that collected the money. I call no name. So Omni collected the money? Is that who collected the money? If they collect money, tell them give us our money.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
The Prime Minister, as I mentioned, in 3 material areas misled the Parliament and the country. He said there was a company that was not licensed. It is true that it was licensed. That it was the only service provider. There were 4 service providers. And 5, that the arrears accumulated under the FNM and it accumulated under the PLP in 2022. Those are 3 material facts. He can refute those.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, obviously the member doesn't listen or just refuse to just continue to ponder and try to create political mischief. Yesterday in church, I spoke about, he spoke before me. It was very good. In fact, it inspired me to recall the story of Nicodemus, which gave some lessons about what one knows who doesn't know and what you expect people to know. I don't know Omni. You call this company named Omni, right? I said that there's a company that collected the money, had no license. Are we talking about the same company? I don't know. That's the first thing you have to ask yourself. Are we talking about the same company? Right? So if you're holding brief for them, ask them which company was collecting the money. The Speaker, that's what I said. Right? And another thing he said.
Honorable Member for Finance.
Another thing he said.
Honorable Member.
Another thing he said. No, yeah. The rally to talk to you now. He said that I gave some impression as to why these funds were being held or otherwise, that I gave some impression about why. I said why. They said why they didn't pay the money over. The company collected. They said, and I said why. If you listen, they said they keeping the money to expand their business. They said that's what I said. They said.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Again, I hold and we hold no brief for the company. I just simply did the same research you did, except you have more resources to do deeper research. But you said 3 things that were materially wrong. If a company is holding government money, the government has an obligation to go and get the money. That's right. Let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. But in the course of going to get the money, it is wrong then to assert what you asserted. One is to give the impression that the arrears was accumulated under the Free National Movement, when in fact it was accumulated under the Progressive Liberal Party in 2022. That's the point. The second point is it was not a single company that was engaged. At least 4 companies were engaged. And you refused to put that on the public record. And then thirdly, you gave the impression that the former administration was footloose and fancy-free, and therefore got a company that had no standing in law to collect money. And if they are registered by central bank, then I believe you're wrong again. So 3 material points, which is different, let me finish, which is different from the issue of collecting government money. Go and collect it, whatever means you need to, go and collect it. But do not give the impression that somebody else was derelict in their duty. Your administration did not collect the arrear. That's 1. 2, there were more than one company. 4. And thirdly, they were licensed. That's the point.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Stop drip feeding wrong information to the public.
As many. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for North Abaco.
Deputy Speaker, I rise on behalf of the resilient, distinguished, and industrious people of North Abaco. A pleasant good morning to all. I'm always reminded of the word of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Whoever wants to be great, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Matthew 20:26. I'm always conscious of the fact that I'm a servant of the people of North Abaco. It is my primary objective in this honorable house to represent the residents of this constituency, to speak on their behalf, to ensure that they are not deprived of their rights as Bahamians, nor neglected in any way. Week before last, Madam Deputy Speaker, you would have noticed my absence from this honorable house. I traveled to the United States to witness the wedding of my once and only son, Kirk Daniel Cornish Jr., and Najee Anya Cornish. My daughter-in-law. KJ, as he is affectionately called, is my only child, or corn seed, as the old people like to say. Recently, he graduated from the university, and now he has taken the next step to start a family. I am extremely proud of him. And I pray that God will bless him and his beautiful wife. On a sad note, I would also like to extend condolences to the family of the late Whitfield Russell of Crown Haven, Abaco, Ms. Rosalie McIntosh of Foxtown, Abaco, Ms. Bernice McIntosh of Cooperstown, Abaco, Mr. Charles Culmer of Murphytown, Abaco. I also extend condolences to a loyal supporter in the person of Mr. Donnie Oughton, father of the late Richard Oughton, who passed away. Also, I want Candice, Richard's wife, and the entire family to know that my prayers are with them during this time of loss. Additionally, I would like to extend my condolences to the family of the late Roosevelt Curry of Grand Key, Abaco. Mr. Curry was a successful business owner who served his community with excellence. He served as chief counselor for many years in the Grand Key community. He will be missed. May his soul and the soul of all the dearly departed rest in peace. It is my prayer that God will continue to surround you with love and comfort during this most difficult time. Deputy Speaker, I want the people of North Abaco to know that I am indeed working on their behalf. Vincent van Gogh said, "Great things are done by a series of small things brought together." During these challenging economic times, with limited resources, I am doing my endeavor best to improve the way of life for the residents of North Abaco. In the years leading up to the 2021 general elections, I canvassed this storm-ravaged constituency, and I heard the cries of the people who were neglected by the previous administration. I promised to bring relief to those communities, and I want the people to know, the people of North Abaco to know, that I am just as committed to that cause as I was on the day that I was elected to Parliament. Deputy Speaker, when this government came to power in 2021, the good people of Grand Key had a vexing problem with the disposal of garbage that posed great health risks to its residents and could have detrimental environmental impact to the island. I am pleased to report that we were able to clean up the dump site in Grand Key, and an incinerator now is now there on the property to dispose of the garbage. I wish to say that it was a collaborative effort between the government and the private sector. To this end, I would like to extend my gratitude to those people who were involved in this project. Golden Isles Minister Miller, thank you. Mr. Allen, the owner of Walker's Key. Mr. Texter, the owner of Great Grand Key. Mr. Hogan, the manager of Great Grand Key, and my team on the ground. Upon taking office in 2021, the James Cephas Highway in Grand Key was in a deplorable state. I am pleased to say that a contract was also issued to repair the James Cephas Drive Highway in Grand Key. In fact, Deputy Speaker, highways and roads that were disintegrating and corroding in Abaco are now being patched and repaired, thanks to the hardworking staff of the Ministry of Works. They are working with a skeleton crew and limited resources, but they are making progress. Nevertheless, additionally, the General Manager of the Water and Sewage Corporation informed me that a contract was signed for the repairs to the road works that were dug up as a result of work carried out in Murphytown, Dundastown, and Central Pines. In short order, we hope to get the roads in North Abaco back to a quality standard to ensure the safety of our motorists. Deputy Speaker, I wish to congratulate Jareel Hepburn, a 10th grade student of SC Boodle High School and a resident of the community of Far Road, on his accomplishment as Athlete of the Month for the Northern Bahamas. It is incumbent on us to create the opportunities and the resources for our young people to thrive. The sporting facilities in Abaco were in a state of disrepair when we took office. The parks, tracks, and courts were negatively impacted by the hurricane and years of neglect by the previous administration. However, we plan to improve our facilities one step at a time. I wish to thank the Bahamas Power and Light Company employees, Mr. Marlon Green and Mr. Ozzie Parker, that assisted me with restoration of lights on the basketball park in Cooperstown and Murphytown. Contracts were also issued to an electrician who installed 2 meter setters on the softball park on Murphytown, one in Murphytown and one in Cooperstown. And very shortly, there will be lights on those parks. Also, I recently sponsored the Basketball Association with a digital timekeeping clock and scoring board. The president of the association collected the check from the office of the Prime Minister in Abaco. These are only some of the small steps that we have taken to restore our sporting facilities in North Abaco. But there is a lot more to be done. All of the basketball courts from Murphytown to Crown Haven and the Keys need to be resurfaced. All of them need backboards, rims, benches, and bleachers are needed on the courts as well as the softball field. Bathroom facilities are desperately needed at all parks in North Abaco except for Murphytown Park, that recently got a new bathroom block as a result of a donation from a second homeowner. I presented estimates for repairs to the track and basketball court in Murphytown to the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, the member for Garden Hills, last week. Hopefully, by the end of this year, we will have upgraded our sporting facilities in North Abaco. Abaco thanks you, member from Garden Hills. You see, Deputy Speaker, we must encourage young men like Jareel and provide opportunities for our young people like Al Pacino Kemp and his teammates from the SC Boodle High School that participated in the Hugh Campbell basketball tournament. Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, not only must our sporting facilities be state-of-the-art and safe for our young people, but we must create an environment in our schools that is conducive for learning. Deputy Speaker, 4 months ago, November 2022, Patrick J. Bettle High School debate team competed in the National Tourism Debate 2021-2022 for the first time and won that regional competition. The debate team consists of Tiana Boodle, Ocean Fox, and Denero Sinfair. I wish to congratulate the debate team, Patrick J. Bettle, the team coach, and all for an outstanding first-time performance. Thus, the importance for a school environment conducive for learning. Repair works are being done and are ongoing in Grand Key at the All-Age School, Foxtown Primary School, and Cooperstown Primary School. The contracts for repairs have been signed for S.C. Gould High School and Amy Roberts on Green Turtle Key. I was informed that renovations and repairs are ongoing at Patrick J. Bettle and Abaco Central Primary. There is a lot of work to do at our educational facilities in North Abaco. We will get there. I was also told that the teacher shortage is being addressed and much progress was made, but teacher shortage is still an outstanding issue on the campus throughout Abaco. I understand that teacher shortage is a challenge, not just nationally, but worldwide. Schools that do not have a teacher in the classroom in certain disciplines are taking full advantage of the virtual school. And I encourage those that are not doing so, it is better to have some instructional guidance than to have none. But we anticipate that as Abaco rebound, there will be adequate housing for teachers and other professionals that want to work in Abaco. My government has also increased the rental allowance for teachers wishing to serve on the Family Island. I wish to publicly commend the member of Angliston, Ms. Glennis Anna Martin, the Minister of Education, Technical, and Vocational Training. She is a shining example of a servant leader. She is a role model for all of us to emulate. I understand, Deputy Speaker, that there is an employee shortage at many of the government departments and corporations in Abaco. When I meet with government heads, I am constantly reminded of these shortages. I wish to commend the workers who continue to push regardless of these challenges. Applications have been sent to the various departments to address those shortages, and I am confident that each minister will ensure that their ministries are fully staffed. I understand that some permanent and pensionable letters has been delivered, but I wish to point out that there are many still outstanding. North Abaco thanks GG, Minister Glover Rowell, and her team. Deputy Speaker, I strongly believe that if we all work together and each one does his or her part, then we will make this Bahamas a better place. There comes a time when we must put our agendas aside, our differences, our prejudice, and work together for the good for the people. We must remember that we have been put here to serve the needs of the people. And if we fail, the people will fire us as they did many others. Let us be the generation of leaders in our nation that serves with fairness, integrity, and compassion. There are some that are speculating about my political future. I say to them, don't lose any sleep worrying about me. My steps are ordained by the Most High God. And if at the end of this 5 years, period, the people of North Abaco are pleased with my services, then they will rehire me. Right. Until then, I am determined to serve my people to the best of my ability. Madam Deputy Speaker, the previous government of the Bahamas neglected the community clinics in Abaco for many years. However, I am pleased to report that major work is being carried out at the Foxtown Community Clinic in Little Abaco, and minor works is ongoing at the Cooperstown Community Clinic and the Marsh Harbor Community Clinic. Air conditioning units were purchased and are on the ground at the Grand Key Community Clinic. Healthcare workers are waiting the arrival of electricians from the Ministry of Health to install those units. There is a lot of work to do in the healthcare facilities throughout Abaco and the Keys. We are up to the challenge to get the work done. I wish to thank Tall Pine Minister Dowell, Abaco loving your contribution. Prove them they say it's wrong. Show them what a good minister, focused and driven, can achieve. We are hoping for those upgrades to our medical facilities. Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Green Turtle Key is one of those communities with a large winter home resident. Tourism is our bread and butter. Since Hurricane Dorian, the bathroom block at Green Turtle Key Ferry was destroyed. Since coming to office, quotes for repairs were submitted. Green Turtle Key, I'm proud to announce, as we prioritize Abaco's need, repairs are on the way for that bathroom block. The loading dock on Green Turtle Key is being washed away daily, which is the lifeline for Green Turtle Key. Groceries, building materials, fuel, and much needed supplies arrive at this dock weekly. A team of experts from the Ministry of Works did an assessment last year It is my hope that those plans are being finalized to address this matter. I wish to thank the member for Fort Charlotte. Madam Speaker, I wish to speak to a matter. Deputy Speaker, I wish to speak to a matter that is dear to me. The member for South Central and the member for South and Central Abaco and I met with the executive team of the Water and Sewage Corporation and both union heads recently to discuss the water situation in Abaco. For many years, the water situation in Grand Key has been in an unsanitary state. It is smelly and not fit for human use. Yeah, that's a serious odor. It is time for us to deliver pure water to the people of Grand Key. During this meeting, we also discussed the repairs and upgrade needed in the well fields throughout Abaco. Personally, I started working on new wells in Cedar Harbor well field in 2017, and to date, they are not completed. The Water and Sewage Corporation collects millions in revenue from Abaco. With the large sum of revenue the Abaco economy contributes to the Bahamas Treasury, Abaco should be priority. Why should we starve the cash cow? Tell me why the good folks of Little Abaco should have high salt contents in their water, and the Water and Sewage Corporation has the funding in their budget to fix this problem. We hope to bring resolution to this situation very soon. I will hold the executive team of the Water and Sewage Corporation to their words that these problems will be fixed. That's the chair. I have his word. I hope not. Equitable education, basic health care, and clean water are fundamental human rights. There is no way in this modern world that anyone should be deprived of these things, especially in a nation like the Bahamas. We are celebrating our 50th years of independence. In no part of this small nation should Bahamians be deprived of any clean drinking water and subject to substandard health care facilities. We must get past these issues so that we can truly empower our people. Deputy Speaker, as Bahamians, we should live like royalty in our own land. Land ownership for Bahamians is essential if we want our people to rise out of poverty. The government has been working to accomplish this. In North Abaco, some Crown land has been issued to Abaconians, but not enough. Hopefully, the process of obtaining Crown land can be expedited and some of the bureaucracy taken out of the process. Deputy Speaker, I wish to commend the Royal Bahamas Police Force for the work that they are doing in Abaco. For a while, crime was getting out of control. The previous administration had failed in its mandate to make people feel safe. However, I see that the team of officers there have ramped up efforts to curb the crime rate, and I believe that it will make a positive difference. Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, small room repairs and replacement of whom remains a grave concern for me. I met with the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, the Honorable Philip Brave Davis, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and the Minister responsible for urban development, West Grand Bahama and Bimini. The good minister promised as soon as funding becomes available, he will launch the small room repair program on Abaco. I also spoke with the executive chairman of the DRA on several occasions and was assured that the paperwork was submitted and they are just waiting on funding to be released. I was assured that when funding is released, first preference will be given to Abaco homes and contractors. Deputy Speaker, I want to remind the honorable members of this House that the people of Abaco suffered great losses in Hurricane Dorian, and the failure of the previous administration, the previous government to repair and rebuild their homes was one of the main reasons why the people of Abaco fired the previous members for the party opposite. I say to the good folks of North Abaco that I am constantly advocating for those of you that need homes or repairs to your homes. I have not forgotten, and I know that the members of this administration, especially the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, have not forgotten your plight. Deputy Speaker, the final point I wish to make is about illegal immigration, the illegal immigration problem in Abaco and our nation. When I think of immigration, the proverb which states, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and now the children's teeth are on edge, comes to mind. A team of officers have been on the ground in Abaco for some time now carrying out restoration exercises. Illegal immigrants are being rounded up, processed, and evacuated daily. I wish to personally thank Carmichael, Minister Bell, and his team of officers on Abaco. It is not an easy achievement to make Kyle Mills proud to be a Bahamian. Job well done, sir. I wish to point out the court order has been lifted that was preventing the government from demolishing shanty towns. Right now, the government is ensuring that all legalities are being covered, and the next step is to begin the demolition exercise, making the environment safe and healthy. I wish to state my position on illegal immigration for those who seem to be confused. I absolutely do not support anyone entering the Bahamas illegally. I do not support or encourage illegal occupation of Bahamian land. I am completely against businesses and individuals hiring illegal immigrants. I strongly believe that all who violate our immigration law should be brought before the courts and that the law should take its due course. Bahamians are required to purchase property and go through a process to construct a home in this nation. If Bahamians must go through this process, no other groups should be exempted. If you want to visit my country, come here legally. If you want to work in my country, apply for a work permit. If you want to live in my country, do it the legal way. I wholeheartedly support the Department of Immigration, and I will do my best as a leader in this nation to ensure that immigration laws are upheld. However, I understand that the Bahamas is very much a part of a global village. We must be careful with how we deal with this very sensitive issue. We cannot violate human rights in the process of carrying out our laws. As good Christians, we too must follow international guidelines in dealing with this illegal immigration situation here in the Bahamas, lest we find ourselves with a trade embargo or some other sanction. Therefore, I appeal to you fellow Bahamians to allow the Department of Immigration and our enforcement officers to do their jobs and refrain from vigilantism and exciting violence in our small nation. Again, my position is clear. I adamantly believe that the Bahamas immigration laws are to protect the rights of Bahamian citizens and legal residents, and anyone in violation of our immigration laws should be held accountable and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Deputy Speaker, there are many other outstanding issues requiring the government attention. A new cemetery in Crown Haven, relocation of Little Abaco dump site, the official opening of Cooperstown Shipping Port, and rebuilding of Treasure Key Airport. Only to name a few. But announcements are forthcoming, as you heard from the member of Exuma and Ragged Island. Deputy Speaker, I wish now to speak prophetically. Some will say my contribution is an attack on my colleagues. Some would say that. That I am blaming or complaining about the government. Absolutely not. I have confidence in my colleagues and our administration approach to prioritize Abaco rebuilding process. To be clear, my contribution is a report to Abaconians on the job they elected me to do on their behalf, my elected duties. Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Proverbs 6 and 16 says, these 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. It went on to name them: putty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood. And I'm sure we all know the rest. But the 7th thing, one who sows discourse among brethren. I await the abominators to show themselves and try to sow discord amongst me and my brethren. The opposition seeks to be the voice, crying out for the poor, the poster child for transparency and accountability. Yeah. A man's character is the total sum of his habits, things he do. Rick Warren. The opposition talks about the poor. Prime Minister Davis travels, transparency and accountability. Then the former Prime Minister Kalani is on record saying, and I quote, government will be placed in situations, not just one, where in some place and time, they would have to make what they call discriminatory or unconstitutional decision against their people. That's Kalani. In the interest of the advancement of their nation, end quote. That is their care for the poor. That's how they care. Yeah. The opposition recollection of their term as government is the country was in a better state. Things was good. What troubles me about that is, are the opposition today now saying that the Bahamian voting populace are that naive that we would resoundingly vote out a productive and good government? No, sir. The Bahamian peoples are much smarter than that. Yes. The opposition speaks of many projects that they were unable to complete due to COVID-19. Again, I am troubled. COVID-19 hampered the completion of some projects. That's fair. I could accept that. But please explain to me, how is it that COVID-19 didn't hamper or stop the purchase of expensive furniture, giving of lucrative contracts to family, lovers, and friends, lavish living, and excessive spending? Make it make sense. COVID should have stopped. Anyhow, I guess COVID was one-sided. Deputy Speaker, if I may, and this can pinch your nerve, Cat Island and Rumkey and San Salvador, Angliston, Fox Hill, and Fort Charlotte serve in frontline politics for many years. And in all those years, as a little boy growing up, I have never heard, read, or watched on the media outlets that any of them were unable to give an account for millions of dollars. That's conventional. Or ever was charged before a court with 56 counts of failing to declare interest in contracts, bribery, dishonesty, receiving money, and money laundering. Some only served frontline politics for 4 years and 4 months. Sit down. Imagine a long political career. The opposition has the nerve. Thank God they didn't even trust themselves with 5-year term.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Barnabas.
I don't mean to disturb the honorable member, but obviously we've said consistently in here that matters that are in the court are in the court, Mr. Deputy, and so I would just caution the honorable member.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for North Abaco.
Deputy Speaker, as I said, maybe it isn't clear, some people have some understanding issue. The member for Cat Island and Rumkey and San Salvador, Angliston, Fox Hill, and Fort Charlotte served in frontline politics for many years. Many years. In all those years, I, Kirk Daniel Corner Sr., never heard, read, or watched on the media outlets that any of them were unable to give an account for millions of dollars spent. That's the nerve bargaining. Or charged with 56 counts of failing to declare interest in contracts, bribery, 56. Dishonesty receiving money, and money laundering. Some only served frontline politics for 4 years and 4 months. Imagine a long life politics. Career. The opposition has the nerve to stand in this place. God is good. Thank God they didn't even trust themselves with a full 5-year term. Thank God the Bahamian voters voted them out. Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, North Abaco support the mid-year budget. May the blessings and favor of God continue to be bestowed upon the Bahamas and its people. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise again in this historic honorable place by the grace of the good Lord and the people of Freetown, who I thank for bestowing this privilege on me. Mr. Deputy, the grace of the Lord was evident to me when we started this debate on the 1st of March, Wednesday, the 1st of March, one of the better days of the year, On the 1st of March, 55 years ago, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the person that's now the Member of Parliament for Freetown was delivered by the midwife at Duncantown, Ragged Island. And the rest, as they say, is history. And it speaks to the job that midwives do in this country. But I was pleased that the Freetown constituency office chose to put on a birthday lunch for me. And the persons who got the first and second piece of cake, Florence Ramming and Queenie Gray. And they know that I do these kind of things, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and if they become concerned that people want to know why they got the piece of cake, I would say to them to tell the people to listen to the song by the rapper T.I., My Life, Your Entertainment. But I did enjoy the fellowship that day, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm always fortified when God permits me to see the beginning of a new year. It always reminds me of His grace and the uncertainty of life. Mr. Deputy Speaker, you know, every time I come to this place, it seems that the themes are repeated over and over and over again. If I may say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this should really be a very simple debate about this book. This is actually what we are here about. We're not here about any of the massive amounts of regurgitated material that we hear session after session. It compels one to respond to it for this reason. If you permit someone to constantly repeat something, it tends to get some permanence. Indeed, the intelligence community would tell you, as they tell us, that that is a real challenge for even large countries like the US, that people use social media to circulate material that may be very untrue and to do it continuously and in vast volumes to seek to destabilize countries. Well, this is my country, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I own it personally, as every Bahamian should. And I, with every breath in my body, will not permit it to happen. We cannot permit people to rewrite history. If your party's position was independence, but not now, that is what it was. If you later change your mind, you can say so. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just wish to briefly remind us of some things that we were confronted with when we came to office. And I wonder if we remember when we first spoke about reduction in VAT, the prophecies from the other side was that it was going to destabilize and destroy the country. That is what they told the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and St. Salvador when he said that is what we will do. I don't know if you remember that, Mr. Prime Minister. It wasn't supposed to work. They said that in 2021. Bahamian people must remember these things that they said and judge them by it. Well, we've been living with it. The cost of just about most things we produce receive a 2% reduction in tax. And just as the Honorable Prime Minister and the Ministry of Finance forecast, it didn't kill the economy. It grew revenue. And so they were wrong on that. Next, we should remember, although it seems a distant memory, that when we came to power, there was still COVID and COVID protocols. And as the Prime Minister with courage opened this country up, we must never forget that some people on the other side were harbingers of danger, that it would cause a great problem. And if anybody doesn't remember it, go and watch Parliament. These things are permanent. But the Prime Minister and the Minister for Health proceeded soundly and with caution. And so we opened up when one suspects if the other party was in place, we wouldn't have in that rate, and things are fine. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the other thing that is most amazing is this. There seems to be, from the other side, an attempt to use the words from Mission Impossible, to disavow the Minist government that most of them sat in. They wish to disavow it completely, but they cannot. They sat there, they didn't resign. They didn't resign when people were locked up for going to the pump to get water. They didn't resign when the then competent authority told the police, if you're out 1 minute after curfew, lock you up. They all sat there, kept their jobs, and took the money. And now, as Yamakroa says, they want to act all brand new. The Bahamian people will not forget it. In case their memory fades, I will remind them. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we need to start to identify the things that are being said. And I promise to get to the book, which is why we're here eventually, and probably spend some time on it. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have had a lot of talk, and it keeps getting repeated. And sometimes you can get mystified about what their position is. Should the leader of this country travel? Should he not travel? Should he take professional people who can know what they're doing, who can take advantage of it? They seem betwixt and between. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd wish to share with you and the Bahamian people something else that I found myself doing on my birthday, the 1st of March, and that was to attend the first lecture by the first Secretary to the Navy to pay an official visit to this country ever in our history. And that's in the person of Carlos del Toro, a Cuban who hails from Cuba, who was in the Navy, who did tours that brought him to this country, but who for the first time on the 1st of March was attending here to deliver remarks and address at the University of Bahamas. And here is what he says, and I would wish it to be heard and consumed by people who don't seem to understand the significance of looking in a man's eyes, shaking a man's hand, the value of it, because it appears that the side opposite, by driving this narrative, doesn't do that. And they would say, oh, you have to travel, but. A butt should be behind people and not in the front of people. But that's a different story. Here is what the SACNAV of the United States of America had to say, and I quote, and Secretary to the Navy, in any, I didn't come up with that. I didn't come up with that, St. Barnabas. St. Barnabas, it says, SACNAV delivers remark at University of the Bahamas. Here is what Secretary Del Toro said. And he said this.
Pay attention.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, he
Order,
says,
members, order.
having said good morning in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 languages, he said this. In any and all of these beautiful languages, it is a true honor to be able to greet you today here at the University of the Bahamas. I am very thankful to Prime Minister Davis for his invitation to speak today and for the amazing welcome that my team and I experienced since landing. I first had the pleasure of meeting Prime Minister Davis at a local 2030 Island Network event during the UN General Assembly in September of 2022. Local 2030 members include island nations around the globe, as well as islands that are states or territories such as Hawaii and Puerto Rico. The Prime Minister and I spoke at length about the climate challenges facing the Bahamas and all other island nations of the Caribbean. That conversation and similar conversation that I enjoyed that day with Prime Minister Brown of Antigua and Barbuda and Prime Minister Weaver Crowe of Aruba made a tremendous impact on me and are in part why I stand before you today. Now, you have a long conversation face-to-face in person, and lo and behold, the Secretary to the Navy of the most powerful Navy in the world finds himself addressing your tertiary education institution. I guess on the other side, a telephone call would have done, a Zoom meeting would have done, or more importantly, you could have spent your time talking about how all Bahamians are corrupt, which is what the previous incumbent did. So I want to be very clear about this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. When we hear the other side beating the drums, and in the G7 countries, they call it the drums of isolation. Stay at home, stay at home, stay at home. The converse of that, of course, is travel and expose your country to the world. They do the Bahamian people a disservice by peddling that, and they do themselves a disservice because history records what you say. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the supplementary budget, some may be of the view that this is perhaps a little pointless, because we had a full budget debate when we talked about the approved estimates. These are now variances that have changed. And at the end of the day, when we come back with the budget again, we will have actual expenditure that may be even different than these revised allocations. But it is a time for us to hear the same old stories trotted out again and again by the other side. And so for a moment, so that I may do justice to the people whose the ministry has oversight of, I'll actually invite us to consider these. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if one looks at the recurrent revised estimates, the Ministry of National Security suffers a decrease in its budget by just under $1 million. Before people become alarmed by that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one only needs to look up and see that the line item that accounts for much of that reduction is the COVID-19 enforcement unit. Because of the relaxation of protocols, there wasn't the need to re-engage many of them, and the decrease in that budget head is over $1 million. So apart from that decrease, the rest of the budget of the Ministry of National Security increased. One can look and see that the budget of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the allocations for recurrent expenditure has increased by $1.81 million. The biggest cause for that increase, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is under the heading salary. And if I may speak to that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when the Prime Minister allocated me this portfolio and we met with the then Commissioner of Police and in continued meeting with the current incumbent, something was very clear. The side opposite appeared to have paid very little attention to resourcing the Royal Bahamas Police Force. What they in fact did as a matter of history is the officers who oversaw the great reduction in the crime rate, namely Assistant Commissioner of Police Clayton Fernanda, Assistant Commissioner of Police Ken Strawn, Assistant Commissioner of Police Layman Delavos, were all unceremoniously sent home. They were unceremoniously sent home when the record will show that ACP Fernanda was ACP crime during that period. And what we met in place was a deficit of, we were told, 900 officers. Well, the increase of $2.5 million over the allocation in the original estimate is a recognition by the Ministry of Finance that we have to fill that gap. And that is what has been happening.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, I believe on two separate occasions, I've addressed this identical issue that has been raised by the Minister of National Security. And at that time, I used the manpower audit booklet that the member is far more familiar with than myself. When we came to office in 2017, there were similar kinds of deficits in terms of manpower at almost every rank. So I'm not disputing the fact that you would have met deficits. But I think for a more fulsome report, it would be useful to acknowledge that there was deficit when we came to office. Every administration there are deficits. So you're improving it. We have no difficulty, but don't give the impression that the previous PLP administration did not leave deficit at different levels.
Thank you, honorable member.
He is correct that he is not fully familiar with the report because that's an inaccurate statement. The bottom line to it was recruitment during the last administration did not address the attrition rate of officers retiring, being dismissed from the force, and dying. You know, Marco City talks about every administration. If I was being bullied, I would use a fairly strong word other than saying that's just plain untrue about this administration. It's untrue about this administration because in every year that this minister has been in the seat and the current Minister of Finance has been in the seat, we have recruited more officers than we have lost every single year. And so the $2.5 million that is added, you don't know who the Minister of Finance is? You don't know who the Minister of Finance is? The $2.5 million additional for salaries just continues what is happening currently. We even had to recruit 58 additional firefighters. because we didn't have sufficient fire branch officers. That was addressed immediately. We now have, having turned out 300 roughly, we have 120 in now. When they come out, another squad will go in. We understand the need to properly man the police. And to use a phrase that they keep saying, we find these problems, we're fixing them. And this figure in the supplementary budget just shows how we are fixing that. And then if we go over to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, one will see again an increase in the budget by 3.9, nearly $4 million. And that's the recurrent budget. When one goes to the capital, there is a reduction that must be explained in the capital budget of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And it is basically in the head acquisition of sea vessels. And the very simple point of it is this: provision was made to begin the acquisition of a new flagship HMBS A.D. Hanna. The procurement is still being worked out in the portal, and so there's a reduction by 2.24 million, but an amount is left to procure 4 safe boats, 41-foot safe boats. Again, history will show that it is this administration that created the Royal Bahamas Defense Force when some people were saying it was Pinland and Hanna's private army. I know history is painful, you know, but if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. And I remind the members of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force that if they lose track of their past, their future may be threatened. 1980, which is when it was created, doesn't seem that long ago. I know I'm an antique at 55 years old, having been born in 1968, but the Defense Force is a fairly young force. And the bottom line to it is, when you look at who equips them, it is this administration. And that's what speaks most clearly: what you do more than what you say. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Defense Force in its budget, the one reduction is pushing back of the acquisition of the HMBS A.D. Hanna while we get bids from 3 shipyards. But that is replaced by the acquisition of 4 safe boats to again expand the fleet of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. BDOC speaks for itself, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There's approval, as would have been heard, for the structuring of the acquisition of a new correctional facility.
1 o'clock hour, as a member is near the end of his contribution, and he's on the floor right now. We wish to allow him to continue.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House to continue beyond the hour of 1 p.m. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House will continue past 1 p.m.
Thank you. The memorandum of understanding has been signed, and we are moving full steam ahead with BDOCs. With regard to the Parliamentary Registration Department, I wish to thank with deepest gratitude the previous acting Parliamentary Commissioner Lovato Duncanson, who I had the pleasure of working with, a diligent, assiduous worker. I must say that I'm getting the impression that whenever I brag about somebody, their abilities, they get stolen from me. as he was recalled to the Ministry of the Public Service to help steer the full digitization of the Ministry of the Public Service. I give him thanks, as I did publicly, as I did privately. I greet the incoming acting parliamentary commissioner, Arthur Taylor, who was chosen from amongst the supervisory ranks of the person then at the Parliamentary Registration Department, as we move full speed ahead with full digitization of the Parliamentary Registration Department. In the last few minutes I have, Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me say this. I think I heard, as I was approaching, and I should be honest, I know I heard an assertion by Marco City that somehow there have been landings in more than one island in the inhabited island in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. As a man who is a man of letters, and I don't derogate that at all, I would forgive him if he wasn't a writer. I would forgive him and think that he just careless for detail, except that's what he does for a living. And so, quite clearly, Yellow Key, which is a key off Andros Day, South and Central Andros, where the Defense Force extracted, I think it was 127 migrants, is not inhabited at all. Now, the bottom line to it is maybe he doesn't know what inhabited means if he says it's a distinction without a difference. But I think it is very clear what inhabited means, and it speaks for itself. Now, if he wishes to find out the significance of why the intelligence people are concerned about inhabited islands and migrants actually navigating to inhabited islands, as opposed to being shipwrecked on uninhabited islands when they're intending to skirt the west of Andros and go to the USA, he might ask that question. But inhabited and uninhabited islands.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm not sure where this uninhabited discussion is going, but the point is that this PLP government administration has laid claim that during their time, there has only been one illegal landing that has actually landed on an inhabited island in the Bahamas, and that is in South Andros. I'm not going to say whose property it purportedly was where this vessel landed, but you can also find reports from January 4th of 2022 where 36 Haitians were arrested after landing in Eleuthera, and I recall this to be in Windermere Island. That's another inhabited island in the Bahamas. So that's two. I don't know whether the good member from Freetown is aware of this report. He is the Minister of National Security, and because he's gone on record to try to bring down the assertions made by this honorable opposition side, I correct the record, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by showing that there are more than one inhabited islands where landfalls have occurred during this PLP administration. One lie is a lie. One mistake is too many mistakes. Whether it was a lie or whether it was a mistake, it is not correct. And what I have given this House now is correct.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you really should be careful if you use lie as it may apply to you. They do something that's a part of their game plan.
Is Eleuthera not an inhabited
It is
island?
very simple. A landing in Andros,
Where are the two members for Eleuthera? They don't represent
right?
people.
The bottom line to it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is a landing, in case St. Anne's, Marco City, and the side opposite is unfamiliar with it, is a particular thing. He just read the assertion that there's only been a landing in one inhabited island. Now, with young children, when they have difficulties learning the English language. One can forgive them.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I don't know what the member for Freetown is saying, but he's getting into landing and landing. He's talking about children. There's no children in this honorable house, but this is the gentleman who represents the Ministry of National Security, and he began his debate today about who got the first piece of cake, who got the second piece of cake. Honestly, you want to have a child's conversation? You talk about who got the first piece of cake, a 55-year-old man talking about cake. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there have been two vessels that have landed in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas under this PLP administration where persons...
Order, members.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, there have been two vessels that have landed in this Commonwealth of the Bahamas since this PLP administration's been in office. The individuals of that vessel got off in our country and were not found. In South Andros, they were eventually found. In South Eleuthero, it took them time to find. When you talk about vessels with persons being intercepted in uninhabited islands, then I will agree. That key that the honorable member was talking about may not be an inhabited island. It's an uninhabited island. When you talk about vessels being found at sea or vessels turned over by the U.S. authorities, yes, those don't count. But when you come in this honorable house and say there's only been one vessel that made it undetected, when there's actually been two, claiming one is not true.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Have your go before I come.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. I don't take any offense in terms of the insults hurled by the member for Freetown, my good cousin. You know, arrogance has a way of afflicting you, and so I'm very sympathetic. I'm very sympathetic to him, and his involvement in church is likely to cure.
Order,
it.
members.
But Mr. Deputy, in our last on the not on the other side, not on the so
Order, honorable members.
Mr. Deputy, the reality is we are concerned about illegal landings. So when I made the point from my seat that there is a distinction without a difference, or again, the point is I'm at a loss as to why this kind of minutia, this kind of irrelevant detail the member continues to focus on, when the reality is we have 100,000 square miles of water, and unfortunately, our boundaries are regularly breached. And again, I made in a statement earlier that the member is seeking to follow in the footstep of two others on the government side in saying that they have done such a good job. That's how they got to the number of one. We shared the last time we were here at least 3 landings, and that was just on a 2-minute search. So again, after the break, I'd be more than happy to bring the information back. The bottom line is we believe their figures to be wrong. The Prime Minister mentioned uninhabited island. When it was first stated, however, they did not mention uninhabited island. They said there was 1 landing. That's my recollection. If I'm wrong, I'd be more than happy to have it expunged. The second thing is, this is the same group that mentioned that 4,758 repatriation was the largest in a calendar year. Again, trying to get really cute with the technicality. It is untrue. We shared figures on at least 4 other years where there was more than 4,758 migrants who were repatriated. And so either way, we have a job to do, and you all should get off this business with this minutia and these technical details. Nobody's buying it. We have more to do. I was talking to you out of a courtesy, but again, discontinue.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, regardless of what is ascribed to me, my good cousin, I've never been arrogant enough to speak for everybody. As they continues to say, nobody is buying it, everybody knows this. I try to stay in my little lane. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we speak in this place, and if he would wish to find the uninhabited, it is in writing. And it was communicated in writing. And if they wish to find out this, if he wishes to find out the significance of it, I invite him to have a conversation with CDF King and his command team. because we're not here to do any small business in terms of playing around with words. We take it very seriously. And so when the folk seek to then step out and just repeat something, and then they say, oh, they didn't say uninhabited, that was added later. It must be called out, and I will continue to call it out. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we now in this country, thanks to the allocations that one will find in the supplementary budget, I am advised within a month, we'll have delivery of vehicles that will permit for saturation patrols, the type of work that permitted the Royal Bahamas Police Force to catch on the way from Superwash the 3 individuals who robbed it. This requires manpower, which we fixed. This requires transportation, and I see you looking South and Central Andrews. Y'all can get some transportation shortly. It requires transportation, and we are fixing that as well. What we call on all people of goodwill in this country to do is to assist us as the National Youth Development Office of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the urban renewal and community areas of the police, seek to take step in interrupting the journey from young men who were born completely innocent to the time that they end up with a gun in their hand, willing to shoot somebody 3 or 4 times about the body. We call on all people of goodwill to understand that it is all of our jobs to interrupt that journey from an innocent babe to a cold-blooded killer. Until that happens, as Bob Marley says, until that happens, and yes, I date myself with Bob Marley, until that happens, we will keep seeing this war on our streets until we all say we must intervene in the lives of these young people. Yes. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Freetown supports the supplemental budget.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Barnabas.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The honorable member for Freetown, I just need some clarity sincerely on this. First, let me state, the officers that you mentioned have served this country and continue to serve this country, and we continue to salute them. Their service to the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the Bahamian people. And just like many in here, I know a number of those officers. The question I do have for you, the legitimate question is this. Those officers came back to the police force in October of 2021, correct? Okay? That was 2020. 2021 was when those officers were reinstated, correct?
No, they were reinstated before the government was sworn in. This government, so they were reinstated. And as soon as you all left, the Commissioner of Police didn't have himself handcuffed.
Okay.
And before this Prime Minister was sworn in, they were back on the job because he didn't have the pressure.
So the question is, in 2022, there was 128 murders in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And so now there's 18 murders. When you made the point that crime was being impacted because those officers, no, you made the point, honorable member, through you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, members,
you made the point that
honorable members.
You made the point that crime was being impacted in a significant way because of the absence of those officers or the decision that was made to let.
Okay. In the interest of
I'm talking to you, man. I'm talking to you, man.
I want to reserve. Mr. Deputy.
the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for
Mr. Deputy, point of order. I wish to reserve until we return. Give me a moment. I just want to reserve. I will commit me to reserve to make a point of order when we return. I can make it now.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Deputy, when we come back, I wish to raise a point of order with respect to a matter that's...
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Good. Thank you very much.
Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy.
Order of members.
Mr. Deputy. again, we are allowing the rules to be taken advantage of. Point of orders, all these members have spoken, Madam Mr. Deputy. They've all spoken. They're extending their time continuously on falsified false claims of point of order, as we just heard. So Deputy, I now move for the House to stand suspended until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House be suspended to 3 p.m. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House stands suspended to 3 p.m.
All right.